Okay, we'll call this meeting to order, March 2nd, 2023 Planning Commission. We'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. John, just so I know, do we have anyone online?
Just double check here.
Just so I don't forget.
We do have one person on.
Okay. Item 3 is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for approval or any changes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion approved. Item 4 is the consent agenda. So this is the Planning Commission minutes for February 2nd, 2022. Any corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Item 5 is open forum. So this is public comments are limited to 3 minutes for non-agenda items. Please state your name and address. No commission action will be taken, and items will be referred to staff. So these are, once again, this is for anything that's not on the agenda. And seeing none, we'll move on to item number 6, which is council updates.
So for the 14th, that was a light schedule. We talked about the development moratorium and talked. And I don't know if you are they starting with what we had set up in that? I would assume you are.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And then we talked about the hiring process for full-time administrator. That was it for the 14th. 28th. We had an update from Commissioner Kevin Anderson, Hennepin County Commissioner, discussion on his priorities, and we talked a little bit about some of our traffic needs, road needs. We talked about the plans for the transportation amendment to the comp plan, the schedule for that. We got the final water trail. That study was complete. And so we got that presentation. We approved bids for Zanzibar, the south side of Zanzibar. And that was it. Item J got pulled, so that was final approval for the MTL plat, but they had to update something. I don't know what it was. That's it.
I'm curious on the county commissioners' updates. Were there any priorities that affect Dayton that you
Not
remember?
really.
Okay.
I mean, our feedback to him was they need to focus on the roads in the area because that's where the needs are. And I think he heard that. It's just a matter of going back and being able to do anything about it. So.
Okay. Question for council?
Yeah. I'm sure this will get brought up maybe more in the discussion of the moratorium, but regarding the transportation plan, I listened to the council meeting, so I know my answer, but I just want to make sure everyone's aware. Do you know the outline or the time frame, or maybe that's a question for staff, of what you guys were talking about with the transportation plan and bringing it forward?
Yeah, we did show a schedule, and I believe it was to the Met Council by June. Is that what it was?
To the council by June, and then approval from Met Council by August, because it's the 60-day review period that they get after council approves it.
Right. That does not include any land use amendments, or I think there was another amendment we realized we had coming, but I don't remember what that was now, but that was just the transportation portion.
Thank you.
I was going to say the other comment that I had, that for anyone who's listening to this that didn't listen to that or watch that, the water trail was a pretty cool concept and project. That
That was it. That was the other amendment.
Yeah,
It had
that-
to do with,
yeah,
do with parks, I think.
that's pretty cool, and it could be a very cool feature and kind of change what we think about certain areas in the city. So
Yeah, I have not paid a whole lot of attention, but it'd be interesting if we were able to get like a canoe outfitter or something in the old village. You know, hopefully not inner tube renters and all that.
That'd be the Crow.
something different. The Crow, yeah. Okay, any other questions or comments? No, hearing none, we'll move on to item 7. 7A is Opus Industrial Park Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So we have 3 public hearings that I'll be presenting on this evening. After that, Kevin will be leading the moratorium discussion, and we'll have election of officers. I'll try to keep brief on all 3 of these items, as they do, like I say, have a variety of action items related to them, and I'll try to present it and keep it clear for you. So our first item this evening is a comprehensive plan amendment. Opus AE Group LLC has requested a comprehensive land use amendment to bring a piece of property from commercial into industrial. The property is currently located at 17600 Territorial Road. If that sounds familiar to you, because earlier in 2022, they came before you with a concept plan related to the development of that site. So this is their next step in that process. It's at the intersection of Territorial Road and Dayton Parkway. It's approximately 10 acres. It currently has a tower lease site on it, and the applicant has some intentions for subdividing that property in the future, or it's been voiced to the city. It's currently guided commercial. It has this B4's commercial industrial zoning district, and it's in the current MUSA staging area. Again, here's that 2022 concept that was brought before you and the city council. What they proposed at that time is 132,000 square foot warehouse distribution and office facility with the on-site vehicle parking and 38 truck bays and docks. And here are some examples of the buildings that they shared during that concept review. There's not a lot more information in the report, given that it is just a land use amendment request, which is ultimately a policy decision by the city council. So what they would be making that final policy decision as it relates to the 2040 comprehensive plan, and any of your guidance and input, I'm sure would be appreciated by the council. We have the mayor and council member Scott is here. I'm assuming to get your information from them. The role of the Planning Commission is to review the request, discuss it, and make a recommendation to the City Council. And then I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, questions for staff, and otherwise we'll open the public hearing.
One question I have, and I don't know if you know the answer, John. I know Jason's not here, but is there any update on whether a curb cut's going to be allowed on Dayton Parkway or not?
I don't know, perhaps Lauren can answer that.
Oh,
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
my understanding is that the county is not looking for an access on Dayton Parkway. The staff would be agreeable potentially to look at a right-in, right-out, but we would be having to approach the county with that. The county was going to take discussion of that item to their plat review committee, but we're waiting on results from that.
okay.
And Lauren, I'm sorry, are you Jason tonight?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm going to do my best to stand in.
All right, okay.
And I would note that we'd have additional discussions on that access with the next step in the process, assuming it gets approval, which would be the site development and whatever other planning applications would go with that. So there would be time for those discussions in the future.
And another question I have related to this, and it goes to the land use designation, whether, commercial or industrial is appropriate, but do we know what that intersection at Territorial is going to look like in the long term? It's going to be signalized, turn lanes? I mean, right now it really is not serving a whole lot, so I get why it is what it is, but
I'm not sure.
You're talking this intersection?
yes.
Okay.
Are there spacing requirements? Like, could you even put a signalized intersection in there and be, given that we're kind of sandwiched between 94 and 81?
I'm not sure exactly the requirements on that.
But there are always spacing requirements between intersections and access points, but the signalization or roundabout or whatever would be the control, would be per the county's decision if they ultimately obtain that road.
I mean, this spacing to me, just give you point of reference, Darren, seems similar to 610 as you're going south to Target. There's a right in, right out to Target, but there's another intersection right there at 93rd Avenue that is signalized. This is pretty comparable to that from a spacing standpoint. So I could see the county allowing a right in, right out if we really wanted it. I personally wouldn't want one.
No, I would agree.
Right in, maybe, depending on the use, but not
Yeah. Okay, other questions for staff? No? Okay, we'll open the public hearing. It is 6:41. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak?
I guess is the applicant here.
Yeah, well, sure. Is the applicant here that would like to kind of present their project or add to it? And if, as you're writing out, if you could also state your name and address.
Joe Mahoney, 10350 Bren Road West, Minnetonka. Good evening, Commissioners. Happy to be here with you this evening. Maybe I'll just talk a little bit about Opus real quick and then more specifically about this site. We're a Twin Cities-based company, started in 1953, and through our history we've been very active in the industrial product type, as well as office, retail, and multifamily. Today, industrial multifamily are the two product types that we mostly develop. There's two kind of main types of development within industrial. The build-to-suit, where you have a known user, and speculative project where you build it, especially with COVID and long lead times, getting a project ready, so tenants can move in. They don't have 2 years to wait for a project to be built. So this project, it's about 130,000 square feet that we're proposing to build. It's very different, I'd say, from maybe the bulk warehouse that, especially like the cubes that you've seen go up. This is probably more geared towards that 20 to 50,000 square foot user. Typically, they're a little bit higher finish type users, have a little bit more jobs, and can be medical, tech, manufacturing, and nature. So with this project, more to the land use perspective of it, I would say it's more cohesive with this project than looking at, say, a retail project there. You have heavy industrial I-2 directly to the south with Semstone. Out of the southeast, there's another industrial project that was directly adjacent, recently approved. Similar kind of scale and nature as this project. And then I do have also a broker with CBRE who listed the project here with me today, as well as the owner of the property today and our civil team, if there's any questions. But he did market this property for it's probably almost 2 years now to wide range retail, office, gas stations, multifamily, and they all declined to move forward on the site. And I think there's some things with it. There's a cell phone tower on the site, there's a railroad, and then there's the access that are probably the contributing factors, along with the neighbors in that immediately adjacent area. Additionally, I know there was some conversation about the traffic. With an industrial or business park type use such as this, there will be less traffic demand than say a retail use that would be going on the site. Finally, I'd say, it's been a little bit of a frustrating experience. We did bring the concept plan forward, and then subsequent to that, without, I guess, notification to myself or the land seller, there was a zoning change. This was allowed in the zoning before when we brought that plan forward. It was modified, and now we're back here today. I wish I was here with the actual proposed development rather than trying to change the comp plan to be cohesive with this. When you look at the comp plan, every parcel to the south of Dayton Parkway is an industrial use except for this property. So when you look at kind of the guiding principles of the comp plan, they're talking about cohesive development and being similar in uses. This one kind of sits on an island when you're looking at the adjacent properties. So appreciate the time and consideration today. And I'm here for any questions, as well as the broker, the seller, and our civil engineer. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
One quick question for you, Joe. When you say
Yep.
higher finish, can you maybe put that into perspective for some of these people? Are you talking like 20% office finish, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell with a speculative project ultimately who's going to be there. For like a bulk distribution, maybe you'll have 2 to 5% finish. A couple thousand square feet of office and the rest racking. We completed a project in Maple Grove about 2 years ago, a very high-tech company, and they were about 25% finish. So I would say it's probably going to be in that 15 to 20, maybe 25% range. And so obviously along with that, a lot of job growth, as well as obviously the tax revenue growth that you'll see from its current condition today.
Okay.
Thank you.
We might call you back if we,
Okay.
once we have questions. Is there anyone else from the audience that has questions on this? So this is the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, we still only have one person online.
Okay. For Brady Busselman, do you have anything to add for this item, or which item are you here for?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I am here for this item. I am the civil engineering consultant for Opus, so I'm available for questions.
Oh, great. Okay. Anyone else for the public hearing part? Otherwise, we'll close the public hearing. And
Could I make a correction to what I said earlier?
oh yeah.
I'm just looking at, I wasn't involved in all these discussions, but I do have some notes from Jason, but I just wanted to say that engineering staff, as you guys kind of alluded to, would be potentially agreeable to a write-in only, not a write-in, write-out. And then also that the intersection at Holly and Territorial Road is proposed to be signalized eventually.
At Holly. Okay. I guess I'm going to keep the public hearing open for a little bit. Ask questions for the applicant or their group. I guess one question I have, so and I apologize, I don't remember the discussion that we had back in September as much. But I imagine we had a lot of good reasons for changing the zoning or the comp plan designation. That was the zoning designation. If Dayton were to have retail, and my assumption is right now we don't have enough population to support a whole lot of retail, but where would that go if it's not at this intersection or this area?
My opinion is it would go further north. Ideally, you'd want to create a centralized location where you're pulling from rooftops to North and South Dayton. And so this is already pretty far South Dayton. It doesn't mean commercial can't go here too, but if you're going to create a concentration of commercial, it'd be, especially because you're capturing residents coming off the interstate here, they're likely going to their homes. So those, even if you move it further north, like closer to 117th or maybe even further north of that,
Okay, so
So you even it's kind of there already, the red blob at,
along Dayton Parkway, not along 81.
correct.
Okay.
And that would be mainly commercial to serve residents of Dayton. Where I look at this site, if it's going to be commercial, it's probably going to be more like a highway commercial, not so much that we want to approve something like that, but it seems to me like that'd be the better commercial use here.
Okay. I don't know, for the Realtor, I guess if you could kind of give some background on what, yes, if you could come forward. And then state your name and address.
Dan Swartz, CBRE, 800 LaSalle Avenue South, Suite 1900, Minneapolis, 55416. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity for chatting a little bit. Very valid question you asked. And so, as Joe mentioned, I spent about 2 years talking to every type of use out there. Specific to retail, Darren, I didn't quite hear what you said. I think, did you say highway retail? Is that the comment you meant?
Yeah, like a
Okay.
highway business type of use would be more
Right.
likely, but
And so, and candidly, we thought the same thing, and we went right to the gas stations and kind of the more that would be driven by traffic. And unfortunately, the response was the lack of visibility kills anybody's interest, because you can't see the site from the highway, which makes sense for all of us that drive the highway.
So you
and do
mean
it.
94 or?
94.
Okay.
Yeah, it's too far, it's set too far back.
Yeah, you can't see it,
Right,
yeah.
you can't see it. So, so that was that type of retail, and then the second type of retail, you start talking about, smaller little strip centers or something. And again, there wasn't enough traffic, and there wasn't the visibility that was seen. We also talked, just to get into details, we talked with the multifamily groups, right? You've, I'm sure, seen a lot of those groups come in front of you. Concerns with the neighborhood, concerns with the railroad tracks, as you can imagine.
neighborhood you mean by like the
The
adjoining
industrial,
uses?
the adjoining uses. I mean, Semstone obviously is a heavy industrial user, and that's a challenge for those groups. So those were kind of the major groups we talked with about the different type of retail.
Okay.
Did you run into any highway business type uses, just looking at our zoning code here, like recreational vehicle sales and stuff like that, so you have some outdoor sales display?
Did not specifically talk with that. Staff, when we started this project, was pretty adamant to us that they were not going to allow the use that used to be on there, which was auto-related. And so we really stayed away from that. And again, in that world, and actually the seller's back there, and that's his background is the auto business. And I don't want to speak for him, but most auto businesses want to locate with other auto businesses. They're not going to be an island like that, so.
Other questions? Any engineering questions, just so, just don't forget about that. No.
No, I mean, the site's pretty straightforward, it's flat. We got our traffic kind of talked about already, so I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, Paul?
More of a general question to the commission, so I don't know if we want to close the public hearing first and then
Yeah, we
open for conversation. So.
can close if no one else is here, so. We'll close the public hearing, so discussion.
Just wondering, I mean, if it's a complicated site to develop right now, does that mean it's the right time to develop it or to change the land use so it could be developed in this use? Because once Dayton Parkway goes through, this intersection could be a lot different than it is right now. There could be a lot more residential connection and drive through here. There's probably not a lot of residents that get off at Dayton Parkway right now to get to their homes. But once that connects through and connects to Fernbrook and to Zanzibar and all that, like this becomes a totally different thing. And I know it's guided industrial right now, or commercial right now, which seems like it could be a good use long term. So I don't know if changing it to industrial use to put a warehouse in it right now would be the right thing long term. So just kind of a general statement to the planning commissioners there.
My other comment, kind of, I think somewhat related to that, and maybe part of why, maybe they had such a hard time finding the use, maybe not, but we did deny the Quick Trip in the corner. That would have been right there, and that would have driven a lot of different, that would have had, as a city we denied it, And that would have had a lot of people coming in and out that might have been more visible than for, some sort of restaurant right on the corner here or something along those lines. So that's kind of unfortunate, the ripple effect of denying something that wants to be there and needs to be next to a freeway. Now the ripple effect is going further north. I struggle with amending our comp plan for one site. We are going through a number of other bigger things with the comp plan right now, and so one site seems to be an extra burden on both staff and other objectives that the city has, such as the transportation plan or other things. So that's where my thought is.
My thoughts are, I understand what Paul is saying about the long-term impacts, and that's really where I'm trying to think too, is what is this site best for long-term? And, the character of this neighborhood, if it stays industrial for the long time, I think that's one thing we had to keep in mind, that complementary uses do go together. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying a convenience store can't go here by no means, but a convenience store is not going to take up 10 acres. And no different than the other site where the Quick Trip was, we only had a small chunk of that for the C-store. By the way, there's another C-store that might be coming, so that's good news. So my thoughts are that the surrounding uses, maybe even in the long term, are going to dictate that the site, whether we do it today or we do it in the future, might end up being industrial anyway. And so part of me is leaning towards that because of that fact, that is, if we have a user today, why not do it today? Because we might end up doing the exact same thing anyway. Because one thing that concerns me about this site for any sort of high volume commercial use is access. It's only got 350 feet on, is it Holly or Territorial Road? And so with 350 feet, I mean, I defer to some engineers in the room, but if you're trying to separate truck traffic for deliveries from car traffic, it's going to be difficult. Yep. So there's the challenges there make me lean towards that this might be industrial in the long term, regardless.
Ryan?
Yeah, I'm all for preserving commercial space because I heard a lot of requests for that in the future. Again, it needs to be placed right, and I have a hard time believing that this is probably ultimately going to be the right place. The only downfall is that we cut a pretty large chunk of what's going to be guided commercial space right now. If we're going to go into land use talks, it'd be nice to see that kind of at least be potentially looked at to be reclaimed elsewhere, just to make sure that we don't drift too far away from having just no commercial and no residential services available.
Okay.
But I don't think that needs to guide the conversation around this particular site. I mean, it seems like it's guided around a lot, or it's sitting around a lot of industrial right now. It seems like we could take advantage of an opportunity to do something with it at the moment.
Okay. So again, I don't remember all the conversations that we had back in September, but in previous conversations, if we hadn't talked about it in September also, was sort of this vision that we have of, I'm going to call it the 610 corridor, where it's higher paying manufacturing jobs. It's not just warehousing. And I understand this is a spec building, could be manufacturing, could be warehousing. We don't know. But also it's a very key corner and it's highly visible. So I do remember at the concept plan stage of having some discussions of not having a lot of, positive thoughts on having the dock doors that are facing Dayton Parkway and County Road 81, but also the conversation while we're trying to work around that cell tower, and it's just a difficult site. And so my initial thought is, for a spec building, this can go a lot of different places in Dayton. I don't think it's the highest and best use at this moment. So in the future, it may still become industrial, like some of the commissioners have said. I just don't think this is the right time, right place, right time for that. So, other discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, John. This is, we've talked a lot in the past about the corner of, the up closer to 94 being the entrance to Dayton, but really I think this intersection here is going to be much more prominent. More people are going to pass through here and realize they're in Dayton, where when you're on the freeway, you're getting off in Dayton. And I agree 100% with you.
I think though one thing that has me leaning towards it's going to be industrial is we can't forget that, this is a prominent intersection, but as soon as you go through the intersection, you're looking at 1 million square foot
You're back to
distribution center.
Right.
So I don't think we're ever going to, and it's brand new, so I don't think you're ever going to change the character of this neighborhood. Like, for example, to think that someday a big box or junior box retailer is going to come here, I don't think that's ever going to happen. So if it does become commercial, it's going to have to be subdivided into smaller parcels likely, which can maybe happen over time. But it's not really a big box or junior box location because you are on an island, or a medical office for that matter, because you're on an island.
Right. So there's the property that's next to it, and I guess I don't know if anyone is aware of it, what the current status is of that, or the future.
You talking the Stenell property? They're breaking ground in the spring, I believe.
Okay.
I guess to your point, though, on the warehouse right across the street, my point to that is just the dock doors up against 81. That was my comment.
Yeah.
No, I don't mind the use at this intersection, I'll say that.
Yeah.
I just don't know if the use for one parcel is worth doing a comprehensive plan amendment or update.
John, do you have any advice on, my experience is that one-off comp plan updates are done. It's not the end of the world. In fact, that's a lot of times how they're done.
It's more of a timing issue in terms of you have to notify adjacent communities. Council has a time period to review, so it just slows down a project if they were to come in with that. If they have a project ready to go, all teed up, they'd have to wait till that process was done.
And from other initiatives that Dayton has going, which one do we want staff to focus on? That's my dilemma. It's not you guys at all.
Yeah. And, from my perspective, we can continue discussion, John, but just to move this along, I'll make a motion to approve a comprehensive land use change and let the discussion continue to see where it goes. But I would say ultimately, to Peter's question, that what the council's going to have to weigh on how they want to use resources. But in my opinion, I think that there's a very high probability that this will be industrial even 10 years from now.
I'll second that motion if we allow the council to weigh what the priorities are.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve recommending the comprehensive plan amendment to change this from commercial to industrial. Do I have that right? So it's motion made by Darren, seconded by Peter. Say all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Well, is there further discussion? Yeah, sorry.
There can be.
Okay, I apologize for that. Further discussion. Once again, this is just a recommending body, so I think our role is to raise the issues and then let the council kind of figure out what to do with it. So, further discussion. Okay, hearing none. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to call the vote again. So it's a motion to recommend approval to amend the comprehensive plan from commercial to industrial. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Nay.
Nay. So the motion passes 3-2. So this will go to the council when?
This goes on the 28th. No, yeah, correct, yeah.
The 28th. Okay. Thank you and good luck. Yep. Paul and myself. So item 7B, we have Sunstone Supply, a conditional use permit and site plan review.
And there's one additional item that I've neglected to put on the agenda. It's an interim use permit for outdoor storage. So there's 3 action items with this particular item. So Sunstone Product Company, the location is 17515 Territory Road where the proposal is. And this site is directly east of their current operations. Looking at the air photo, you can see there's an existing facility on the site. They would be retaining the accessory structure and demolishing the current facility here, and the new construction would be in this area, as well as this area with the parking storage. It's a 5.56 acre site. It's guided industrial, it's zoned I-1, light industrial, and in the current, it's in the current use of staging area. The role of the Planning Commission tonight would be to review the requests, discuss them, and make a recommendation to the City Council. Again, there are 3 action items which we'll discuss a little further. Action 1 is a conditional use permit for outdoor storage display area. And that's in this location in front of the new parking area and new building. The purpose is to display the products that they sell, like patio pavers, fireplace pits, so it'll look more like a patio than a storage sales area or anything like that. It's just to display what they have inside the building. The action item 2 is for a outdoor storage area, and that would be subject to conditions. It's in the yellow area here, and that would be for bulk storage of items related to the materials that they also have inside the building. Now, a lot of the standard site condition criteria that we do review, I'll walk through here. So they do have parking in this area, have demonstrated parking here, or proposed parking here. There's a berm in the center of the island. That's landscaping. There we go. So here's the landscaping that's identified with the facility. There are public utilities in front of the site, and they are meeting the ordinance criteria related to the landscaping. I believe you find 1 or 2 conditions in there related to the landscaping comments and irrigation. Engineering did not identify any issues with the site plan. We do have an existing site that's just being retrofitted with a new facility, so hopefully it'll look different than it is now. It would be supporting their use to the west in terms of product sales and things like that. The applicant is here this evening for questioning, and here's a picture a picture of an example of that display area. So here's some cement table with seating, fire pit, pavers. So that's the concept of what that display area will look like. The zoning code requires a maximum of 600 square feet, so you'll find that as a condition in there. And for the outdoor storage, one of the conditions you'll find in your report is that this would, since it's an interim use permit, it would be for up to 50 years. And, or I believe, or the life of the building, I think it was stated in there as part of the condition. And they do have stormwater management on the southern portion of the site. And there is building perimeter landscaping.
Okay, any questions for staff? Otherwise, we'll bring the applicant up. No? Okay, we do have the applicant here from Sunstone.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alex Oline.
2025 Center Point Boulevard, Mendota Heights, Minnesota, 55120. Semstone is a locally family-owned company. We've been in business for 96 years. We are looking to better serve our customers in the Northwest Metro. This facility would be would help our current business. It offers products for concrete contractors, so this is not a typical homeowner comes in and buys stuff. This is more contractor-based. We sell concrete finishing equipment, concrete forming equipment, sealers, that kind of stuff. And the display area is more for contractors and architects to come and help pick out materials for their clients. We've got Joe Raddick, our civil designer here, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Where's the nearest facility that you have that's similar to this?
We've got one in Egan.
Egan, okay.
Yep.
It's nowhere close to here. But yeah.
No.
Okay.
That's as close we got.
Okay.
And even though it's primarily for contractors and architects, just visually, the outdoor display is something like you'd see at Patio Town.
Correct.
Just point of reference for.
And homeowners are welcome to come
Yeah.
in. It's just not our main clientele. Yep.
Understood.
The outdoor storage, like what's going to be there?
So we'd have pallets of block, landscape pavers, sonotubes, rebar, stuff for concrete work is what it would be.
Okay.
Yeah, this stuff is all getting shipped in from other locations. It's not coming in from the plant next door.
Correct. Correct.
One thing related to John's question that is with this IUP for outdoor storage is I'd like to define what the bulk outdoor storage is a little better than just calling it bulk outdoor storage. So part of it is getting your opinion of what's all encompassing of what you're visualizing there. So block, something better than just bulk outdoor storage, so it doesn't, the use ever changes someday, they have to come in and.
Did we submit? We submitted a list of storage items with our application.
You did?
We did.
It's on the site plan, and it lists quantities and kind of
Okay.
square footages of each material. It's a table kind of in the bottom right of the site
Page
plan.
33 of our packet.
Perfect, thank you.
Oh, I see. Is this area going to be fenced or is there going to be any screening?
There'll be screening with landscaping, and then the site will be gated. Is the plan.
Okay, so there will be a fence around it?
The back storage area.
The back storage
back-
area.
right.
Yes.
Okay. Type of fence?
I think we call that chain link.
Vinyl coated.
Yep.
Okay. And then there is, it's showing on the, I don't know, one of the site plans that there is some off-site drainage that goes onto the neighboring Semstone property?
Yeah, you want
I can speak to that, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's an existing pond west of the property. Currently, some of the site, the roofs of the existing buildings kind of drain west to that pond. So we're just kind of regrading that swale, but the roof now drains to our proposed pond, so there's actually less water that's going to be draining to that existing pond. But it all ends up in the same pipe from the proposed site and the Semstone site. It all goes in that same pipe along the south and then continues through the King Solutions there.
Okay, so this is more of a regional,
It's not really regional, so we're doing our own pond.
Okay.
It just drains like the 20 feet of our western edge of our boundary drains to that existing pond, just green space. We're not sending any hard surface to that existing pond.
okay, I see. So, other questions?
I did want to make one note on the IUP conditions. Condition 4 states that materials stored in the outdoor storage area are limited to items sold and stocked in the interior of the building. I don't know that that's reasonable for this type of outdoor storage, because we're not going to store rebar inside the building and outside the building.
Sure.
So we'd like to strike that if
Okay, well,
agreeable.
before we get too far, I guess if there's no other questions, I'm going to open the public hearing. No immediate questions?
Let John check online.
Well, it's more questions from us, so.
Oh, never mind.
We got it. 7:15, we'll open the public hearing if anyone would like to speak. Kind of guessing not, but anyone at all? Anyone online?
I'm trying to get it up here.
Okay, we'll wait. So we'll go over some of the conditions and what questions you may have or that we may have.
Mr. Chair, there's no one on the
All
Zoom
right,
meeting.
nobody but Amy. So, okay, it is 7:15, we'll close the public hearing. So any other questions or discussions? I guess one question, the 50-year sunset, is that something that you had requested, or is that coming from us?
It's something we requested.
Okay, and why 50 years?
We were just looking for a longer term on that IUP.
Okay.
That's all it was.
Sure. I guess personally, I'd be opposed to 50 years, just because it's so far into the future. I'd rather see a sunset date of when the property ownership changes or 20 years. And I'm picking 20 years just because that's, we update our comprehensive plan every 10 years, but it's a 20-year plan, and that's about the farthest we can predict.
I wouldn't want to see it as if the property changed ownership, because Semstone theoretically could sell as a company, right? And that could happen next year, and then all of a sudden that use would go away, which would be problematic. I also think it should be tied, like John said, to the actual use of the building. So as long as Semstone is operating that particular type of use, that outdoor storage would be allowed, because without it, that use doesn't really work.
Yeah. So yeah, I could see somehow defining what the use is. Well, I mean, the conditional use permit is going to define what the use is. So if we tie that in, the outside storage to that. So the idea, if this became, I don't know what, like in a truck cleaning facility or whatever else, it's not going to be, vehicles that are stored in the outside storage area. It's still material storage.
Let's also keep in mind, John, that they're limiting it to the items that are on that schedule of materials. So we don't have to. We don't have to think about other uses. It'd be essentially if they sold to Knife River, and that's
different name, same
use.
Same use, yeah.
Right. And then let's also think about the other thing to think about that I'm thinking about with the outdoor storage is proximity to adjacent uses and location in the city. I mean, this is tucked back by King Solutions and not really seen.
And they own the other property that's undeveloped next to it as well, too. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have 3 items, so if we have the site plan review, the interim use permit for bulk storage, and the conditional use permit for outdoor product usage display. So,
were you going to say something?
No, I was agreeing with that.
Okay. I was going to ask the applicant on the order, just in case we deny one, is there a preference? Is there one, like if we deny one?
kills everything.
Kills everything. I'm curious how we tackle this. Makes it
really
easier.
For us, we kind of need them all to make it work.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go for probably the easier things and start out with the conditional use permit for outdoor. I'm going to go backwards for conditional use permit for outdoor product usage and display. So this is I like the reference for the patio town example, but let's see. So any discussions on this one?
I don't have any concern regarding that. Just in general, I don't have a great concern on the IUP either, as long as the IUP is defined to the stuff that's in their application. So I would just be a condition I would have as the IUP get more specific.
Okay. with the CUP, so some of the conditions, I've got to remember now. So the limit of 600 square feet, that's by ordinance?
That's by
So we're
ordinance.
carrying that over to the conditional use permit? I don't know if you've sized this out, or,
Yeah, it's 20 by 30.
okay.
A question for you, is that sufficient?
Yes, we can make that work, yep.
Okay.
There's item 4, which is the outdoor product display area shall limit items, or shall not exceed 5 feet in height. I
No
guess,
problem with that.
okay. So what, I mean, to me, 5 feet isn't, it's, at eye level.
So
You know,
imagine constructing an island or a barbecue station, it's still going to be below 5 feet.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, when I've been to like garden centers and looking at wall displays and all that, it's usually much more than 5 feet.
And that's
But if
not
that's-
stuff we'd have
Picture
outside,
in the
though.
middle looks like it's.
Outside, we'd be looking at more of our hardscapes, our pavers.
Okay.
Maybe a few stacks of retaining wall blocks, stuff like that. It's nothing that's gonna be real tall. Anything we'd want to display like that, we'd put inside.
Okay.
And that is a picture of the Egan facility.
That's actually our Rochester
Or
facility.
Rochester.
Yeah.
The packet I'm looking at, just a small picture, so I just assumed it was computer generated, not a,
No, that's our that's our actual, yeah, that's our
okay.
display.
Do you have any questions specific to the conditional use permit?
I do not.
Or does the commission?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the interim use permit. So this is for the bulk outdoor storage. So you had mentioned that this section will be fenced.
It'll have a security fence and a gate, yep.
Okay, like 8-foot fence, or?
It'd probably
trying
be,
to-
no, it wouldn't be 8 foot.
Okay.
It says 6 foot in
It'd
the
be 6 foot.
Okay.
plans.
Yep.
And you had a request to strike condition 4 altogether, or to modify it?
We,
I think it can be struck altogether. It's just not pertinent.
if you're gonna tie it to the list we submitted, it doesn't, it could be struck.
I'm trying to think if there's some other limitation that we could put on. I mean, I understand your point, and I don't disagree with it.
I mean, the limitation, in our mind, the limitation would be tying it to the list that we've submitted, that we wouldn't store anything other than what has already been approved.
Yeah, the only concern that I have, if you're looking at 50 years, your list is going to change over 50 years. And
Which just means they have to come back, if it's
And amend it.
significant, then they just need to come back and reapply for a CUP. If it's,
You could just
So
say something
instead of
about retail
striking condition
products.
4, I guess I would suggest that we make condition 4 specific to some of those items listed, to all those items listed.
And then it could be modified if those were to change.
Yeah,
They can amend their CUP, yes.
yep.
okay, so how do you
I
want
mean,
to?
what about wording it so it's tied
Right.
to like retail products sold by the business or something? So if things do evolve over time, they don't have to come back and go through the whole process. Like,
I wouldn't want to have it so vague, sold by the business, because then if they sold their property, anything could maybe be sold by the business and be put in outdoor storage, I guess. And so I'd
Yeah,
rather have
we-
that applicant come back here, and if they're changing what it is,
But if they sell the business to a different business type, then this goes away. Outdoor, right? Because
I'm going to
The
defer to
CUP
John.
runs with,
I-
the interim is interim, the CUP
Yeah.
runs with the property.
Right. With the interim use, I'm comfortable, I got to think of how to word this, of, the sunset is when the land use changes. The land use is, I don't know if we're going to call it concrete products or concrete and
I'd
construction
keep it
products.
simpler and let them have the burden to come back to us if it changes,
And
instead of us trying to make it perfect.
And John, Simstone's been around for
Long
96
time.
years.
96 years, yeah.
I know a little bit about concrete as well, and most of these materials haven't changed in probably most of that time.
It's not a, yeah.
I mean, you can get down to steel or fiberglass rebar, but there's not, it's still called rebar.
Mhm.
So I would go off the list here and then maybe add a small verbiage for, and like materials, just to give them a little more flexibility, but not be onerous on someone trying to come do business here.
To be clear, Peter, when you're looking at that list, you're looking at the black
The
bold.
the black bold, yep.
Okay.
The masonry reinforcement, not
Yep.
not the specific types
Yep.
of reinforcement that they have listed.
I'm comfortable with that.
So do you want to reword it, or how?
I
what are you
would,
suggesting?
I would just say, right where it says limited items, and then it says currently sold in stock, that's where I'd strike the currently sold from there on out and replace it with the items in this list.
This number 4. Oh,
And like materials?
I'm comfortable with like,
I would like to see
Materials.
like materials in there.
I mean,
Gives a little leeway.
And like, I mean, wholesale doesn't change much.
Right.
And if I could make a friendly amendment to that, do you?
Yep.
Suggest as approved by the planning department. You know, similar items.
yeah, make
as
it
approved.
administrative, okay.
yep, that makes sense.
Okay, so Darren, how do you want to, or John, one of the two, whoever's going to write this down as
Condition
notes.
number 4 would read, materials stored in bulk product outdoor storage area limited to items. Peter, you want to help me out here?
Limited to items and.
Limited to lumber, installation, rebar, rebar rings, wire mesh sheets, block and landscape, masonry reinforcement, expansion joint, pedestrian domes, and like kind materials used in the business.
I would even just make it simpler for now and just say, as listed on the outdoor storage schedule, and then have John type it up later.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I heard about their product finisher. They have a bulk storage tank out there in the outdoor storage area. That would be on that list based on what was proposed.
So is that a bulk storage tank that you're selling, or?
We
That you're
sell
using.
a form oil that you use to coat your concrete forms so that you can remove them. That's what we store in there, and then we sell it in bulk.
Okay, so so the tank is there permanently?
Correct.
The tank is fixed down in the lower, is it lower right-hand corner?
Correct.
And
And that location was reviewed by the engineering and by the fire chief.
that area is also outside of what we were calling the outdoor storage area.
The intent is that would be part of the
Okay,
Oh, I see.
outdoor storage area.
Okay.
I guess I didn't highlight it,
okay.
yeah. Because I'm assuming the valves for accessing
The-
the tank would be from within the outdoor storage.
Correct.
Yeah.
So your fence only blocks off the drive lane, it doesn't actually go around the whole storage yard, is that correct? Am I
Yeah, it
reading
just
that
blocks
right?
off the driveway.
So it's not a security fence, it's just a,
I mean, you have to
Huge
drive
way
through a
to
pond
block
on,
off.
you have to drive through a pond to get to it. but-
yeah.
And then you need some way to load up all this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, no,
that's
fair enough.
palletized.
Just make sure we're clear.
Yeah.
Other questions specific to the interim use permit?
I had one for the applicant. Number 5 says vehicles are prohibited from being stored inside the bulk product storage area.
Yep,
I'm assuming you're going to be loading these with a forklift or a lull.
correct.
And do you need to store that in that area?
That would be stored indoors.
Indoors?
I mean, it'll run there.
It'll
during the
run
day,
there, it'll be
but
out there
not
during the
parked
day,
out there. There'll be no trucks parked out there.
just not overnight.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure everyone's clear on that.
Yep.
I have no problem with it. I just wanted to make sure it worked for your
Yeah,
operation.
vehicles will be parked indoors at night.
Okay. So anything else specific to the IEP for outdoor storage? Okay. Still, for me, I'm still uncomfortable with 50 years. I am okay with a change in use. so however long that is, which still could be 50 years, but.
Could be.
Okay, we'll move on to the site plan. So right now, there's one building out there, or two?
There's two buildings existing, and there'll be two buildings when they're complete.
The old Sing Towing building has been demolished already.
Okay. So it's I'm going to say the bottom one that's still there?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. And what was that previously used
It
for?
was Sing Towing. There's a towing.
Oh,
company.
okay, that's, okay. And that building's going to be just kept as it is?
Correct.
Okay. So the new building, is that, I'm going to assume it's concrete?
It will be concrete.
Okay.
And masonry, yeah.
Okay. Any comments or questions on the appearance?
What is the height on the bulk outdoor storage? I'm thinking of the screening to the south.
We can go about 3 pallets high, so
12 feet.
12 feet.
And to the south, I think that's just, is that King Solution?
Yeah, you're just backing up into the
Mhm.
King
Yep.
Solutions loading dock area, but I'm kind of treating you like anyone else that came up here.
Right.
Not.
Yeah.
And we
Yep.
did provide
Yep.
screening trees on the south.
Yep,
there,
and
too.
that would be just the wondering, and I'm not the landscape architect engineer expert here to know if that's enough.
Yeah, we're missing that. If it wasn't King Solution to the south, I would imagine we would ask for more landscaping, especially along the south property line. It's, as appearance, you're screening more of the, you're screening out King Solutions rather than the other way around, which, it is fine in this circumstance. Think of the height of 12 feet and, versus a 6-foot fence still, I think of a semi-truck as being 13, 14 feet tall. I don't have an issue with 12-foot high pallets. So on the site plan, I mean, you're meeting all the landscaping requirements, if I remember correctly on the.
I believe that's what your report says.
And this is an industrial area.
It is.
So,
On this site plan, is it the intent of customer traffic to park in front of the building and employees to park in the long stretch of
Yes.
use of the building?
Yep.
Yeah, I think for the location of the property, it's, meets the landscape requirements.
Yep.
I think you did a nice job spreading the trees around. It's more just kind of beautifying your property than screening anything, because it's not much to screen from or for.
Yep.
I think the building looks good. I appreciate the use of the different materials, and kind of goes with your business anyway, so it highlights that. So, but it'll make for a nice building. Yeah, I'm good with it.
okay, and assuming you have no questions on the conditions?
The one I just had a question on was item 15, or condition 15, regarding the development agreement. Is it typical for just single properties to enter into development agreements with the city if there's no public improvements? I guess I would say it's not.
I think that's a carryover condition, so I wouldn't think we would need one.
Just a blanket one that kind of carries over. So, I guess.
Like carryover, like we should be striking it, or carryover because it's just like a catch-all? and
I would
just
be
there for-
comfortable, given that it's a conditional use permit, interim use permit, that all the items that they would be required to follow through with, as well as the site plan approval conditions, would be in the resolutions of approval, that we wouldn't need a developer's agreement.
Okay. Well, I'm going to lean on staff's recommendation, and I'm sure there's a lot more to it. So, okay. There are a couple items that are duplicates. So if, where'd it go? Item number 5 and 11. So I think if staff, or John, if you can just clean that up and before it goes to council.
When we transfer those to the resolution, we will do that.
Okay. Otherwise, if there's nothing else, if someone would like to make a recommendation, or a motion, I should say.
I'll make a motion to approve all three, the site plan, the IUP, and the CUP as discussed and modified within this meeting.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we haven't actually closed the public hearing.
Oh, okay, thought I had. We'll close public hearing at 7:35. Thank you, Kevin. So there's a motion to approve all three items, so the site plan, the conditional use permit, the interim use permit, as amended, and we're not necessarily wording those again because it's kind of lengthy. Is there a second?
Yeah, I would second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Peter, seconded by Ryan. Any further discussion?
Quick point of clarification on the IUP, condition number 1. What, are we tying that to the land use then? Or to the building property use as opposed to a time frame?
Peter,
I'm clear on.
it's your motion.
I left it as 50 years. I don't think we had any other clear direction from anyone else.
I'm okay with 50 years, but if someone else has I would rather have 50 than 20 if I were the applicant, just because of the investment you're making. But I think we're covered from a standpoint of how when it terminates, it's going to terminate because they're leaving.
And again, it's just a recommendation, so the council could change that based on their decision.
Could I offer an amendment to say at 50 years or a change in use? You know, whether the ownership
Any advice
changes.
from staff on that, in terms of making sure we're doing this right?
We already, John, just point of reference, we already made that whole list of items that would
be the
be a
change in
significant
use.
change
Yeah.
in use.
That's true, okay.
Unless Menards makes a mini Menards and sells just those
Well,
items.
you never know. So, okay, I'll scratch that. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? No, hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion approves 5-0 for recommendation for approval. This goes to council.
Same date,
Same date, which
March 28th.
March 28th. Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7C is Dayton Mini Storage, a conditional use permit and site plan review.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. First off, I'd like to thank the applicant for working well with staff on getting all the materials needed for this application review. It was kind of a lengthy process, but we worked through it and got to you here this evening and scheduled for the city council. Dayton Mini Storage is located at 18470 Territorial Road. It's a 2.9 acre site. It's vacant agricultural. It's guided industrial. It's zone I1, light industrial. And it's in the current use of staging area. Site plan considerations that should be found in your report: surface water management, wetland buffers, park dedication, screening and buffering, area charges, lighting, internal traffic movements, and architectural design. In terms of the landscaping, one of the items I requested of the applicant is to provide these renderings of the proposed landscaping at maturity as viewed from a passenger, like a pickup truck. And they did provide that. Gives a little more depth to what's being proposed and the screening that it will provide versus just a plan view of the landscaping. In terms of the internal parking on the site, the majority of the users are parking right in front of their unit as they are loading or unloading their unit, but they did provide actual designated parking spaces on the property in these locations. In terms of landscaping, you'll find some conditions related to adding additional landscaping here and in the required yards. Probably the biggest item that the council will have to have some discussion about is the utilities for this site. It's currently within the development staging area, the MUSA, but there are no utilities adjacent to the site. The closest are 500 and 1,000 feet away. I don't recall which order that is, but, so the initial application came in with no water being on the site, but through the development review process, it was identified by the fire chief that the units do need to be sprinkled. They are 2-story units, and the applicant has discussed that, and they will, according to their sprinkler consultant, they would have that ability to service the water irrigation on site. The landscaping also is required to be irrigated, so that would have to be fit into that design. There is a comprehensive plan goal policy, Goal 13, Policy 5, page 5.4, which requires all new industrial uses to connect to public utilities. So again, it's a policy decision. It's a policy, so that would have to be discussed by the city council. But it is found in the comprehensive plan. So if you were to have knowledge of that, again, I talked about the fire protection, the landscaping irrigation, again, needs to be part of that design. In terms of the architecture, the building elevations are included in your report. There is a rendering that were included in addition to those landscaping renderings. Gives you an idea how the facility would look. Again, it's all indoor as per the zoning ordinance. I would let the applicant speak of, expected customers and things like that, or any nuances to the site that they may think based on operating other facilities. So.
Okay.
So action item 1 is the conditional use permit for indoor mini storage. And again, that's with conditions found in your staff report. Action item 2, which they could be approved together like you did in the last application, would be a site plan approval with findings subject to conditions. For the conditional use permit, the response to the ordinance criteria related to a conditional use permit review was found in your staff report. And any of those that are pertinent will be referenced in the final approvals.
Okay. Questions for staff?
Just to clarify, but if they had water to the site for irrigation, are they proposing private well if they're not
Because
connected?
of private well.
If they're not connected?
Yeah. And one of the conditions you'll find in the report is that the fire chief, AKA fire marshal, wants to have that design reviewed by a third-party irrigation contractor. So that would be part of any building permit review process.
Okay. Any other? Go ahead, Darren.
One of the questions I'm trying to wrap my brain around that really hasn't been explained good is, I understand the utilities are 500 to 1,000 feet away, but what is the process of moving them along? Are they stuck at the auto auction site and the auto auction site's not going to do anything until, does the city have to pull them along? I mean, how do they move along, I guess?
The extension of utilities is all development driven. So, it's not like the city would put these in without any assessment to benefiting properties. But at this point, there are indications where that they can service it with a private well. And Jason and I talked about it, and he was just wondering, is it a an actual thing you want to do numerous times within the community, given you have a development staging plan, you have logical expansion of the use, so you have a normal expansion of utilities, and develop falls or burdens with it. So again, it's kind of a policy decision. If the need can be serviced, one thing that would probably be, should be talked about is, should utilities become available, the site would be, I think I neglected to add this condition, would be that they would be required to connect to public utilities if they're installed within the territorial road.
We'll get to the public hearing. Right now, do you have a map or where you could show where the existing sewer water is currently?
I do not have that in here. perhaps Lauren would have an idea.
Just one moment. My understanding was that the sewer was about 1,100 feet away and the water was about 1,700 feet away along Territorial Road, both located to the east of the
Towards the
site.
northwest,
Sorry.
towards the northwest.
They end to the southeast of where the site is now, along Territorial Road.
Okay, so I mean, it's a significant
Yeah, so
distance.
there's 2 parcels that, one of which the auto auction owns, that would be leapfrogged at 770 feet by this one.
Yeah.
And I guess I would just encourage the city leaders here when they think about their policies is that because this road is in, utilities don't move like they do, like say in a residential subdivision. When you go to the next in line, we have to figure out a process mechanism to move them along when the road's already in.
Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing at 7:46.
Hi, I'm Jason Richmond, and this is my daughter, Kobe Richmond, and we're the mini-storage proposed applicants. And so we've been through a journey. We've owned the property for 12 years. We were going to build a waste hauling facility there at one time and just storing trucks and things like that, and that fell through years ago. And Kobe's been a manager for public storage for a couple of their different locations on and off, and she told me, she goes, Dad, you know, that property that you guys own out there in Dayton, it's in a high demand area. So one of the things that we looked at was what kind of storage do people need? Now, some people need that 5x5 unit. The kids or child's going off to college, they come back, and then they need that unit for that. Then you have people that are downsizing and coming into the community and getting their single-level home, and then they need additional storage, so they need a different space requirement. Then you have other residents that have boats that don't want to park them into their driveways and on sides of the houses and the backyards and that, so that's another use. Then you have small businesses from time to time that need, you know, a 10x40. They want, you know, they're a contractor that will have like heating and air conditioning equipment, and they use that as their warehouse space rather than going to a big warehouse and having that office front and everything like that. So during my study, that was all taken into consideration. And our architect team and our builder came and said to me early on, you know, there's no water there. And they came up with a solution is that we stub in the piping for the water so when they come by that we can just hook on at that time. So that's why I was in the background raising my hand. I forgot about the forum, so I apologize for that. But I'm going, so anyways, that's what I had to say.
Jason, before I forget, what is your address?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 1408 Amen Court, Mesquite, Nevada.
Oh, okay.
So I came here for this. Kobe's in Eden Prairie.
18260 Duck Lake Trail, Eden Prairie, Minnesota 55344.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Questions?
One of the questions I have is, how did you guys get comfortable you don't need restrooms? And part of it would be is, are you going to have an on-site management leasing office on the site too?
So in our findings when I was working with, when Kobe's been doing the public storage management, what happens when you have bathrooms on site, you actually create an environment when you have heated control units where you get people that try to sneak in there and actually live in these things in Minnesota during the wintertime. And that creates a problem. Now, you have cameras and everything that's going on, but when they walk onto the property and they have their key codes and that creates a problem. And when people are moving, they don't need to use the bathrooms. They're typically wanting to unload, get their stuff into their units, and then leave. So,
The question I have then for Colby is, with the public storage, how many of the facilities don't have restrooms?
As far as I know, they each had a restroom because they each had an employee working there throughout the entire day. What we are planning on doing is, yes, we do have a leasing office, but that's going to be based on appointment. And then also, give me 1 second. Everything is going to be done online, like renting leases and doing it that way. So there's not really going to even be a need for me, who's going to be managing the property, to need a toilet at that time.
Just from a code aspect, unoccupied storage doesn't require restrooms.
Oh, I'm sorry, if you guys could also use the microphone, it doesn't quite carry the whole distance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Do I need to repeat?
No, you're fine. So I would imagine, the whether there's a bathroom or not, that's going to be taken care of by, or is handled by building code.
Correct. Well, part of it is that, and I guess where I'm trying to get to is if you had water and sewer at the site, you probably would build a bathroom. And so I'm trying to drive home the point that we should be figuring out how to get water and sewer to the site as policy before we just approve a CUP. I mean, that's just the way I view it.
Do you have an idea of how to make that happen?
That's Dennis's job.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking outside the box here, and if you're really wanting sewer, what would we need for a typical storage unit? What, a 4-inch?
Well, you'd run the pipe for all the uses along the corridor, so not just this use.
You're talking just sanitary?
Just sanitary to service this unit.
Yeah, well, 4-inch would, because there would only,
Yeah,
if you
there'd
did
only
run
be
it,
one.
it'd
There'd only be one
single
restroom.
hole, right.
So Darren, what I'm getting at is we don't know how deep that sewer is going to be out in the roadway. If you do want to require it, maybe a compromise is to put a 4-inch with a little lift station for this site that dumps 1,100 feet down the road. It's a minimal investment for these guys. I think it's asinine to ask for it, but it's a solution.
Yeah, to be clear, Peter, I'm not asking or suggesting that they should have to pay for the sewer pipe, because there's obviously other properties that benefit. I'm suggesting that as a policy, looking at what we saw up there about, the policy we saw about sites are supposed to have public water and sewer, is we should be executing plans to figure out how to make that happen. This area, well, I guess none of us know how long the auto auction is going to be there, and that's going to be a big impact on, the need for this area.
Yeah, I think part of the intent is, suppose something happens, whether something happens or not, the pipe gets to your property and then it just stops because you've already got, the well that you need. So,
or the property to the west comes in next with the development, and now the distance just got even further.
Right.
And I'm more referring to the policy. I'm not saying that you guys absolutely need it. I'm more referring to the city policy.
I think to your point earlier, though, Darren, this is a little different than when we talk residential areas that need a pipe expansion or something along those lines.
It makes sense that there's some type of an assessment, when sewer and water is available, that, one of the conditions is that you would hook up, and whatever those costs are would be assessed to you at that time. Whether it's, 2 years from now or 50 years from now.
But would they need to hook up? They don't need to hook up for their use. What are they going to hook up to if they don't build a facility?
And there goes the challenge too about the city special assessing it back to them, because they have a valid case now that there's no value to us because we have no need for it.
Well, yeah.
It's actually a city requirement that when sewer and water become available to the property that they hook up. It's in the city code.
Yeah, it's in the packet.
Perfect.
But yeah, perfect.
Okay.
I'm assuming you'd bring a stub to somewhere on their property and just call it good there, and that's hooked up.
Yeah. Whenever the main pipe went through on Territorial Road, they would include stubs to each of the existing properties as part of the improvement project, whether that was developer funded or city funded and assessed back to the benefiting properties.
Okay.
And I think just from a policy standpoint from the city, that's one of the challenges you have is if you don't have the pipe there now. When the pipe does come through, you might struggle special assessing back this property unless you can tie it into the development agreement somehow, because they won't benefit if they don't need it.
We're good on that topic. I think so. Other items, appearances?
Just a quick clarification, the renderings to the plans, most of the floor plans show that primary building being more of a flat face, but the renderings show it being, a square kind of bump out with the tower. And just wondering if the renderings or the plans are more current.
The renderings and the plans match, so there is a bump out on the front.
Okay.
That is reflected in the current plans.
Yeah, the civil plans though show a flat front.
Okay.
On there.
So the architectural floor plans and the
Okay.
renderings are accurate.
Okay. No, that's good. I mean, it gives a little bit more, accentuates the front a little bit more.
What kind of material is this made out of?
Insulated metal panel and masonry down around the bottom.
Okay. And John, what is our or Kevin, our architectural requirements for industrial? I mean, I'm assuming this meets it.
There's a variety, masonry or stone tip-up panels. There is metal. It does talk about similar panels that's being proposed. So we kicked around the architectural. They were comfortable recommending what's coming through there.
Okay. And I think metal panels, this isn't the typical corrugated pole barn type metal. This is
No. So
heavier
these seem
duty.
like the modernized extra storage space ones that where they're flat and they've got different color panels and no, it's more on the higher end.
It's like a stucco finish almost, like
on the metal.
Yeah, on the metal.
Okay, I can't. I'm curious, but I can't picture that. as-
Certainly,
as
it's
a-
a-
It's
it's
like an embossed kind of.
I think we've
Yeah.
seen at least
Yeah.
one come through.
Arlo steel.
Yeah, that's the one. We passed around the sample.
Yep.
Okay. And how tall are these buildings?
They're about 28 feet.
28 feet?
I
Okay.
thought I saw 35 somewhere, which
Yeah,
is still
that tower,
shorter.
I think,
Yeah.
got
at
a
the
tower
front.
element, and then that's not including the roof pitch. So.
Yeah.
So on the ground floor, then you're going to have, I'm assuming, garage doors that are facing the outside, then
That's correct.
and then the second floor are more the, the 5x10s and 10x12s and
That's correct.
however you break that up. Okay. Other questions or comments?
The two questions I had, with that second floor, is there, I didn't read in detail on the architecture, is there an elevator plan?
There's lift
Down in that-
elevator.
down in that tower.
Right. There's a center portion between the two buildings.
Yep.
Elevationally, it's this area
Yep.
here between these two that'll have like a platform lift, so both passengers can bring up storage items within it. So it's a larger than just a passenger elevator.
Okay. And I'm assuming fire was aware of that as well. And then the other question I had, I don't see it on the site plan. Are you guys enclosing, taking one of the units and that's your garbage or
For what?
garbage?
Garbage.
Okay, so that's the only thing you don't want to do with mini storage is having garbage containers out. Because if you do that, they just throw and throw and throw and it goes out all over the place. When I call
Oh, gosh, yes.
You're the one that lives it. I'm the
Yeah.
one that's saying.
If you leave something out and more people see that you're leaving stuff out, they're gonna just keep on adding it to it and it just, oh, no.
So how do you handle garbage?
So how I will handle garbage is that we will have an actual dumpster inside of one of our units that is locked. If I see any trash on the property, I'll pick it up. If anybody leaves anything in their units after when they vacate, it will go into the trash can, of course, recycling if needed at that point. But yes, that's how we're going to handle that trash. Anything else, everyone has to take the trash with them.
Okay. So I have to imagine that in code we require all the properties to have garbage or garbage service, but
Yeah, we're going to have
Makes sense
garbage,
to me.
but we're not going to
Yeah.
make it
It's
available
controlled.
to
Yeah.
Right, yep.
to everybody. Because the idea of mini storage is you're storing your stuff, you're not
You're not
throwing
leaving
away
it there.
your stuff, so.
Is the metal picket fence portrayed in the renderings the planned fencing for the front?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. In the staff report, I gotta find it now, there's I think a setback that was a little short. I gotta find what the page was. Okay, page 4. Rear yard, where what's required is 25 feet, but the proposal is 20.
Well, the side yard on east is 20, it's supposed to be 25, just above that.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. 40-foot setback.
Yeah.
Or 25-foot setback, 25 and 20, and then 25 setback, and it's only 20.
So with the conditional use permit, I mean, essentially, you'd have to make that fit.
Right.
Without a variance, so, it's a sizable lot, I would imagine, with 5 feet, you can figure out how to make it fit.
To page 4.
I have that, but we're more than a 20-foot setback on the rear for the building. So
Well, he's
I don't
got the
know.
table there, so.
So I don't know where that 20 feet's coming from. We exceed 20 feet setback on the rear.
Okay.
If anything, it'd just be like the corner of that west building that's like angling
Right.
up. That'd be the only place that it would be a threat, otherwise it looks like it's more than enough. So what about the side buildings though?
So I would say, this isn't an application for a variance, so on the building permit review, it has to fit within those setbacks.
Right.
So, yeah. Anything else on the site plan? So I will comment, I do appreciate having the traffic circulation plan on there. It answers the question of, there's other plans that we've reviewed where it's just a question of, is there enough space to turn around in? And, when you have that, when you provide that information, it's an easy, yes or an answer to the question, rather than having us kind of debate it for 10, 15 minutes. So I do appreciate that. Anything else?
One question I have for staff too, in the staff report I had highlighted is, there was some discussion that we might be wise to ask for 10 feet of right-of-way on Territorial Road. I noticed that was in the engineering report. Can you guys maybe shed a little more light on if we should be asking for that or not, or if it's in the plan?
It's not in the plan.
It's not in the plan?
So it would be to accommodate future expansion of the roadway to a wider width than what it is now. I believe now, sorry, I'd like to confirm, but typically we would see a wider right-of-way than what is there now to accommodate something like if there were to be a shared left in the center or something like that. Something wider than the 2-lane section that's there now.
If we were to request that, does your plans accommodate that, or has everything got to shift?
There would be 10 feet outside of our fence line, but not within our property line. So I would actually have to look at that, because I think you would be getting up into that permanent fence. We had proposed like a masonry solid
Got it.
fence down low, and I think you'd be getting pretty close to that.
So I can't tell from the version I have. So right now, you've got a fence on the property line, or it's off of the property line?
It's right about the property line.
Okay,
Yeah.
so requiring a 10-foot or asking asking or requiring a 10-foot easement would force that to be moved.
Correct.
Okay. And before I forget, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name and address. too.
Brannon Grease, 500 North Commercial Street, Neenah, Wisconsin.
I'm sure the minute taker is going to thank you for stating that.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Two out of three of you are coming from different states, so, yeah.
Yeah.
So, if, normally if it were a plat, we would require additional right-of-way. In this case, I would imagine it'd be an easement if that's something the council would like to require.
I don't really know the right answer.
That's the property line, right?
I got the existing right of ways about 80 feet.
Is there anything else?
Looks like setbacks are fine, scaling the drawings, but
Okay.
like you said, permit review will verify.
Yeah,
Yeah.
granted,
Yeah, I'm sure.
these are kind of generic, well, I mean, very detailed generic drawings, but not to the same scale as what you'd have for a building permit.
Correct.
Okay, so this request is for a site plan review and a conditional use permit for mini storage. Would anyone like to make a recommendation? Or a motion, I should say.
Is the public hearing still open? I
always forget that.
Did we open it?
You did open it.
Okay. Is there anyone online that would like to
We'll check
speak? I thought somewhere I saw there was a comment or a chat.
Let's see, 2 participants.
Mr. Chair, the only person present is not here for this item.
Okay. Anyone else here for the public hearing? If not, we'll close it at 8:07. Would anyone like to make a motion? It's pretty quiet.
This is just a discussion point, and, mini storage was put as a CUP for a reason, meaning that we wanted more flexibility of determining if we want mini storage, period, and where. And it's nothing that wrong with mini storage or nothing against you guys, but I think that's a valid discussion to take under consideration. We had a discussion about the prior commercial site. I guess I'd be a little more adamant that, again, the auto auction could be there forever, so it's difficult to do that. But this site, if it had public water and sewer, I guess that's where my mind's wondering is, would a different use be proposed on this site?
If there's water and sewer?
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on sprinkler systems. I would imagine that kind of drives a lot of potential uses or just the cost of whatever those uses are.
Almost every use with employees needs a restroom, so I think you could start there.
Yeah. I guess my thought is I see the need for mini storage. Whether this is the best place for it, it's not a bad place for it.
I think it's a really good spot for it as far as mini storage goes, because they want highway visibility and it's got interstate visibility. It's excellent. Whether that's the right use is a different story.
It is. I mean, I would much rather see, going back to the previous conversation of, this 610 corridor of, the high-value manufacturing jobs, and this isn't it. This is essentially a warehouse. But it still serves a needed use, and I'd rather see a mini storage on the south side of 81 than the north side of 81.
I think the size of the lot too prohibits a higher and greater use, right? I mean, I think it's a good spot. You said it's got visibility. It's tucked away just a little bit. It's a use that doesn't need water. So, yeah.
Other than sprinklers.
Other than sprinklers, yeah.
On the conditions, did you guys have any questions on the conditions of? No. So John, we do have a couple of duplicates on number 13 and 16, and then regarding sign permitting, and then 10 and 15 are very similar for lights. So I would say if 10 and 15 could be combined somehow. So that's in regards to exterior lighting.
So on our land, you know, we have like 2.9 acres, but we have that wetland piece there that we had to negotiate around. So, I mean, when you're talking about sites and uses and stuff, you really got to dance around what that was, because what did we spend, 8 months working around that piece? You know, and it's not easy because you can't have anything really up against that. So, I just wanted to bring that up in case it was missed.
Yeah, that one, just additional comment, we're in front of you guys 2020, 2021 to change the zoning of this property. When we changed it, mini storage was a permitted use to what we changed it to, and then your comp plan changed it to a conditional use. So like, yeah, a year ago it was a permitted use and we were good. So
We're trying to be more restrictive and
Right.
make you go through a few hoops. I mean, the renderings, I mean, they look very nice. You know, I'm happy with that. Anything else? So we've not talked about easements, we've not talked about
I've been
assessments.
scaling some of the easements, and based on what I'm seeing, there's almost 20 feet from the right-of-way to your fence. From what I'm seeing, I think that looks good. Turning movements on the site, I hope whoever's backing a boat in has good insurance, but that's about that. And you know, maybe one of the things that you might want to consider for yourselves as you're managing the property and to alleviate a restroom on site is maybe in that storage garage that you guys claim as your own. Maybe you make room in there for a porta potty or something along those lines to alleviate you know, the longer days that you're out there cleaning a stall out or something. Those are kind of the things that I'm thinking of. I don't have too many other issues with the use. Looks a lot better than when I was going to say I do remember one coming in a couple years ago on here, and this looks a lot better than then. So,
Is that the same property? Or was that different?
We
one?
never proposed the mini storage with any drawings or.
Okay, I can't remember where that was.
talked about within here, I thought
There
it
was
was.
a mini storage on the
Yeah.
property before.
On this one. Peter,
Okay.
one question I had, that you mentioned that the fence was 20 feet back. Were you suggesting that in the easements, were you suggesting that they have room for an easement or they don't?
Well,
Or do they, and I'm going to trust your judgment here too, do we want 100-foot wide versus 80-foot wide right away?
I guess that's something I'm not sure. You know, it really depends what the uses are along here. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, people talk about commercial, and that whole auto auction
Right.
could be the commercial site you're talking about if that ever went away.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very sizable property.
and I'm guessing Brockton over being a county road is not going to go away anytime soon. So this is going to be the shortcut
To avoid 81.
to avoid 81. And so I could see this very well being 100-foot right away through here someday. I guess I would encourage staff to look at an easement along here versus modifying their site at this point. I don't have enough knowledge to say that it's needed.
Okay.
We will have that discussion before.
Okay.
Because
The council for that discussion.
one of the other things, depending on how that auto auction site develops, you know, does Territorial become a cul-de-sac here before it hits Brockton, and it actually comes up this way and back into a site through the Atlas properties north of here. I mean, there's so many variables with this for an area that is high potential to redevelop.
Anything else? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
make a motion to approve the CUP application and site plan, right?
Yes. So then is that with all conditions?
Correct.
As
Discussed tonight, yeah.
as discussed, so the corrected
Yes.
ones? Okay. Is there a second? I'll second. So it's been moved and seconded, so this is recommend approval for the site plan and the conditional use permit for mini storage. Any further discussion?
I don't, never mind, there's no answer. I was going to rehash the utilities, but I don't think there's an answer, so it's a policy.
It is, and I guess I would say if staff can maybe put some more thought into this before it gets to council, and if you guys have any recommendations. In addition to the easement question, I guess, that's not part of a condition, so it's just a request for staff to look into it further. Any further discussion? Otherwise, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. So, thank you. And this goes to the council March 28th. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, you're quiet today.
I know.
Interpret that correctly? Okay. So the next item is 7D. This is 2023 moratorium discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I'm kind of going to run through, this is a policy discussion for you to recommend to the city council, so there's no formal action, you just make a recommendation. This came about back in early February at the February 14th, maybe it was the January 24th council, to look at doing a development moratorium and kind of considering what that would encompass, how it would go about, what was the reasoning behind it. And so at that 24th meeting, then staff came back at the February 14th meeting following, and council had a pretty lengthy discussion, as the mayor indicated. It was about an hour long of kind of determining where in the city they would like to see the development moratorium, what it would encompass in terms of land uses, what would be the reasoning behind the development moratorium, and also how long it would run. So the recommendation from council is what staff's bringing forward, which is that boundary I have on the screen and that was in your staff reports, indicated in red. So it's mostly the southern portion of the city, north of 81, pretty much the east and west boundaries of the city, and then a line that's roughly equal with 125th drawn across, and then French Lake to the west boundary. With that, so the reasoning is to allow a transportation amendment process to be completed. An update was given to the council at the February 28th meeting. The rough timeline, I didn't include all the dates in here in terms of public hearings and meetings with the county, but it is planned to have council approval or be at the meeting for council approval in June. It would then be submitted to the Met Council, and it's expected that they could act and grant their approval in August for that, within the 60-day time window they have. So that's kind of the timing for the transportation plan amendment, and the reason that the council thought a 6-month time frame would be appropriate, as that would run 6 months, or associated with when the transportation amendment gets completed. You can tie it to either of those, the date or the actual transportation plan, and when it gets approved, it would just be an action that would be following the approval. So if we got approval in August, at the next council meeting, we would then rescind the interim ordinance for the development moratorium. As far as the commission, the council is looking for feedback from you on kind of all the aspects that go along with the development moratorium, which would be that the area, the land uses that are included, the timing, and then the reasoning they had was the transportation plan amendment, so kind of considering that as the nexus for what the development moratorium would look like. And then also recommending if you think a development moratorium is needed as well.
Okay.
If there's any questions for staff. There was a question on what staff's recommendation was. Staff's initial recommendation to council was to not have a development moratorium, so staff would continue to recommend that. And then this is what council brought forward for the proposed development moratorium.
I guess I'm going to ask a question for Dennis or Scott. How did this start originate from the council as far as the idea of a moratorium?
So I had concerns, given that we lost our pretty much entire planning staff. We also knew there was a transportation plan amendment coming. I know, at least, you can kind of see it from the map, but clearly this land use isn't what we ended up doing with the Parkway. The Parkway now goes up and it butts on 17 here, and it shows it going through here and up here. Originally, it was supposed to come right through here, hence the... So there's land use changes coming. What else? I think there was some questions about our residential development process. Darren, you and I had talked a little bit about moving to more of a larger area plan process. I don't know what that involves. Instead of these 100-acre chunks, we would actually master plan an area.
Okay.
So there was a lot of questions about, a lot of stuff was up in the air, and so it seemed like, given where the economy is going, it seemed like we could put the brakes on. I did not want to get into a situation where we had with the Lee development, where we suddenly had to figure something out. And that's it.
Okay.
In kind of a nutshell.
Just as a follow-up, it seems like there's a lot of focus now only on the transportation amendment. Is that kind of where things have shifted now, tying things to that? And then
I didn't like that. To me, the land use is big. It seemed like the whole discussion was zeroed in on the transportation plan. And that was, so land use wasn't really discussed at the last meeting, other than it would flow out of a transportation amendment. But I still think that there's a lot of land use questions, not just with where the X is at, but in other areas also. So this one I just pointed out, and this is all wrong.
So if I understand what you're saying, just making sure, after the transportation plan, you still believe we may need a moratorium to figure out the land use?
I do.
Okay.
There were members on the council that didn't want any moratorium.
I don't disagree with your thought process. I wanted to make sure I understood. Because I agree wholeheartedly. I think, like, my thought process on this is exactly that, is we need to kind of figure out the roads, and then what's going to go around the roads is the next step, and then can't really open anything up for development until after that point, because it may change.
Yeah, if we get the transportation amendment issued, and let's say, Met Council rubber stamps go through, so now we still have a lot of land use problems in that area. I don't know, Scott, you want to chime in?
I agree with what you're saying.
I just...
Scott, you might as well come up to the microphone.
one question for staff would be, is 2020 open for development? And if it's not open for development, what do we need to do to open it for development? Because some of these land uses are in the 2020 staging, so we can buy time there too by saying that, hey, we can't open 2020 because we don't.
The discussion there, it sounds like they're not open until we move them to current.
Correct, because we have the current terminology in this, and this is all, neither John or I were here when this was done, but because there's the current terminology, there's a distinction between 2020 and current. And so while 2020 may have not been the best term for it, because 2020 came around by the time we adopted the comprehensive plan, those two are distinct categories. So would have to change the staging from 2020 to current to essentially bring it into what's served by utilities.
And is there, so if we were trying to figure out land uses in 2020 and it took another 6 months, is there any repercussions just to tell the people that, hey, we can't open it because it's 6 months, or is there timeframes we got to follow to open a staging area?
The only time frame you have to follow for a 2020 staging area is by the end of 2029, because that'd be the end of your window
Okay.
before that staging area has, unless you did an amendment to change that 2020 to a 2030 area, if you still needed more time to plan out the infrastructure or, the capacity to serve that area of the city.
So, and from what I took from that was, if it's in 2020 and not current, it has a de facto moratorium, right? 'Cause we just-
For subdivisions, correct, because you could deny based on it being premature if it wasn't able to be served at the time the application came in.
So what if there was a 3-acre parcel? You're saying it could not be denied because it doesn't need a subdivision application?
Subdivision just has the premature clause in it, so that's where this premature subdivision comes from. So if you were talking about an existing 3-acre lot of record, they could build a single-family home on it with just a building permit.
Or a commercial building if it was commercial, but.
Commercial would have a site plan review,
Okay.
and then potentially a CUP or an IUP like you just saw, and those all open up the door for the premature. It's only when they have to get a planning approval. So an existing lot of record can be constructed on for single-family purposes, but as soon as you scale up into like a commercial entity like a Quick Trip or another, even just a box store, those have requirements through site plan review. And same thing like we were discussing, those have employees, those need sewer and water. So if it's not able to be served with sewer and water or the appropriate needs, it's a premature application.
It was a couple of years ago, I don't remember the name of the project, but we had this kind of a healthy debate on the commission on when to do a small area plan on the north side. And I think the request was to, have the council
That one was
address
a mess.
this.
That was the dilemma, yeah, that one was a mess because Nick Gagne didn't have control of the properties. They just had control of one.
So Dennis, kind of going back to your comments, we have two different things. So there's the transportation part of it and then the land use. And I don't, I agree with you. The transportation part, there's a schedule of when we could have that solved. It's August, roughly.
Yep.
The land use, that could take some time.
I think that's the bigger nut to crack is the land use. Yeah, the transportation amendment, I think we can get through those, checkpoints pretty quick. I mean, it's still got to go to the Met Council. It's got to have some other things, but land use is the one that I think is going to be and the transportation one. I think there's pretty much a consensus what we want to do. Land use, I don't know that there's going to be that consensus.
I would suggest that council figure out a way to understand the big picture land use before the transportation amendment's done. I watched the meeting, I understand it was probably not wise to make decisions in parallel, but that doesn't mean in the big picture you shouldn't have a meeting on land use before the transportation amendment's done, as well as maybe staging, because I would prefer the staging to follow some major roads that we put in versus just opening stuff up and putting burden on other roads.
Yeah, they all work together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we know enough about what we're doing with the transportation, unless we get some surprises, that we could start land use fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I just think from a high level standpoint, especially if people decide, we're out of industrial land, maybe we want some more. Where's it going to go? And that's going to influence the transportation plan.
Yeah, it's easier for us to look at, going back to the previous conversation of wanting more retail, but if there, right now there's not a market for retail, and that's fine. 20 years from now, if we're saying, okay, we're going to, push aside 300 acres for retail when the need is industrial.
So what I did, John, because I study real estate trends, maybe I geek out too much about it, But I had put a red star right on 125th where Dayton Parkway hits through. That's 3 miles, 3 to 5 miles from every single major commercial corridor. So that's Rogers, Maple Grove, and that's why in my opinion, and again, we're not going to be attracting commercial users that
Is going
are going to be
internal
freeway-driven
customers, yeah.
uses. And so they're more going to be commercial users that are serving our residents. And so I think I'm okay moving them further north, you know, because then North Dayton can come down to it and South Dayton can go up to it. And so it'd be just south of the park there eventually, and we need rooftops before they come anyway, so that's why eventually you build out slowly along that corridor so that happens. But back to our discussion point of moratorium. I'm not against it. I think it makes sense. I think that what I would appreciate that you guys narrowed it down and to the boundaries, and you know, we could talk land use changes in historic village, the Dahlheimer property. It's endless. And so I think making it more tied to the transportation plan makes sense currently. And if you got to add more, you add more in the future. But I would shrink that. I think the boundary needs to be shrunk up. Reason being is if Graco came in, they might have to subdivide one of their sites yet. We'd say no. Landspec, John Roush, who did the Arlo Steel and the Capital Partners building, he still owns 2 parcels, and he has 2 active users that are considering them, that are in the moratorium. And so to me, all that purple area to the west of French Lake Road needs to be out of it. Meaning we don't need to delay stuff there if it's going to happen.
Yeah, because transportation-wise, that's not going to change. You know, it's
Right.
more of the Parkway and Zanzibar connection.
So
Peter, you're thinking.
The industrial parcels I'm talking,
line is the proposed.
of the industrial. Now, part of the white dash line that I proposed here is, you know, we got the letter from on the stencil property. I think they have a valid argument not to be in it, only because we have a plan. And if we want to change the plan, I get it, but this is why when we want to change the plan, we have to move and plan ahead. When we're changing the plan because of something else, we are kind of putting a burden on them. But
Well, I got a different point on that one, but I was going to ask on, so this went from just a residential to now a full development moratorium. I think to your point, and especially in the areas that we've, you know, on the west side of French Lake where we've already got buildings up, it does not make sense to preclude any other new development in that area down to like the cubes and kind of almost following your border here. I actually think the red line going across 125th there needs to go further north, because as we start to change the orange property in between, I get what you're saying. It's not going to be in development now
because it's not in the
staging plan, but it puts those owners on notice that we are going to be talking about the land use of their property, and we need to have them involved. And that's the only reason I'd move that border north, is to put them on notice now instead of 6 months from now when we start digging into the land use. That's the only reason
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
is move it up to either South Diamond Lake or the south side of the park right there at 129th.
Right across.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a huge shift, but it gets talking to the right people who are going to be affected most by the land use changes.
We only made that boundary because of the 2030, 2040. I mean,
Yeah.
that little patch of orange won't get developed anyway right now.
Yeah, and I would prefer too that you move that line on the eastern boundary to the park. So I live on the far eastern boundary of the city, and I don't think anything's going to happen there, but it's in current, and it makes no sense to say you can't because they're on Champlin Utilities anyway.
Yeah, I think at the time we were
It was
done-
supposed to be park.
We were,
That line should have been the park, on the
Oh.
west side.
West side of the
I
park.
think we were
Yeah.
kind of done talking,
Yeah.
and we just started.
It was undecided between the west boundary of the park and the east edge of the city, so I included both because I'd rather you have the discussion on both and then
Sure.
shrink it in.
So you're saying just running alongside
Yeah,
the park
yeah.
there? And I have no problem with that, and up here, you're saying
I'd run it down the west side of Dayton Parkway, where the cubes is, so basically west of the cubes, west of the Dayton Parkway extension up to 117th.
Well, you'd want to go.
And then north of 117th, still in it, but up to 117th.
Oh, up to 117th.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say you got those 4 homes there.
Yep. And, that leaves the
Back up. You're saying move this up?
No.
Move the southern part? What are you saying?
Yeah, Ryan's got it.
basically
Ryan, you're tied.
You said coming up along here, we should just exempt a lot of this area here because it's already kind of under
Yep.
construction.
And it's going to be unimpacted by,
Yep.
I think that's correct.
Pretty much all you gotta use is the West French Lake Road boundary.
Yeah, and another thing that's in there that could potentially is the quick trip pad sites. I mean, they platted them as one lot, and I don't know if they got any users coming in, but if they wanted to replat that lot and develop it, it'd be in the moratorium too. And so we should get that out.
The other thought was the moratorium, staff was pushing that if it was 4 months or 6 months before anybody even got anything moving, this moratorium would be over. Now, if you bring the land use into it, it likely wouldn't be over at that stage.
There's a very good probability nothing happens in the next 4 to 6 months, but
Right.
that doesn't mean that maybe this isn't appropriate because it could happen.
It was kind of a barter deal.
I think the property that I'd like Peter to chime in, because I know he's got some comments that we need to talk about, is that Stencil property, because who we got the letter from.
Right. No, I think that property, I mean, that's one, the more as I sit and stare at the map and sit and stare at land use around it, I think it's guided wrong.
I do too.
I think a residential property there is wrong. I also want to understand what is going to happen with Territorial and 81, because that is such a bad connection, and what's going to happen to Dayton Parkway. If Dayton Parkway, swings up and connects to Zanzibar, and goes straight north and south, does there need to be I believe it's French Lake, does that go straight south then, right along the border of the Stenzel property, and then we have a whole different conversation of what needs to go there. And this is the kind of things that I would be looking at in the transportation plan, if I were you guys, is kind of these connections into existing infrastructure. The county's not going to improve Territorial, but that's one of our worst intersections. And so how can we improve it? Can we improve it by bringing a roadway up through the Stenzel's property up to 117th or to French Lake Road? Is that a possibility? Is there other ways around this, right? That incorporate into the transportation plan?
Well, I agree that the interchange should hook to Zanzibar. It's the most obvious connection. I mean, it's the perfect north-south connection for the city.
And there's not many.
And to me, it wouldn't, like Darren, when Darren and I were talking, it wouldn't hurt to actually try and move that along to help develop that area. And then focus everything around that connection.
I mean, I think most of you guys know my opinion, but without Dayton Parkway being built, it's hard to imagine adding another 2,000 homes to Dayton, period. Because that's the only thing that's going to alleviate traffic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
I would encourage you to, with the transportation plan, I know there's been a lot of focus on the X is gone and what's going to happen to Fernbrook, but as we know, there's not many options, but we need to figure out how Dayton Parkway is getting from 117th to Zanzibar. And there's not many options, but one of the obstacles is East French Lake Road is running at a diagonal and creating pinch points. And so, I mean, you hate to throw ideas out there like this because it freaks people out, but it's kind of longer term. But I would suggest someday even considering vacating that to make the land development more efficient in that area when the time's appropriate.
Yeah, I thought that too.
No, I don't have an issue with that. Therein lies the whole issue where Dennis was pointing where the 117th connection should have moved a little bit east. But, and how that ever happened, I don't know. But,
I mean, this area is a perfect example of our first small or large area attempt because it's that complicated. as far as a plan, smaller, large area plan.
And maybe, it sounds like, and I could kind of suspected this, but the transportation changes, there probably are quite a few more areas to look at than just simply the X.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how we accommodate that. Do we have a joint session? What do we do? Because there's probably quite a few concerns out there, ideas out there.
Yeah, one concern.
I don't know what, this area we know is in my mind, I wish we could stay away from it. Because it's messed up and the county's not going to fix it anytime soon. And there's no easy fix. But
With the Stencil property, when you say not residential, are you more referring to the density that we're proposing, or should be higher density residential, or just no residential period?
Well, I'm thinking right now, the way it sits, I'm thinking that property, that intersection cannot afford to have any sort of density on that corner.
So
that's my first thought. My thought that I was having is, geez, there's 500 plus homes down there now, and it's 3 miles down to Target, and that's a great location for a little CVS or some small convenience store that's not a gas station but a little bit higher end, or coffee shop or Anytime Fitness, things like that, right? A little strip mall that's not going to draw a ton of traffic off of 81. It's actually probably going to draw more from the neighborhood. And so that was my thought with that, is maybe that needs to be looked at for either a mixed use or and I'm not talking a mixed use where we're building homes. I'm talking a true mixed use unit where it's something on the first floor, and if we do have to put residential on the second floor, we do. And I'm simply not pushing that as a resident right there. I'm pushing that as we've got all the industrial down there. We just put through one of the commercial spots there as another industrial, but this is a residential abutting property on one side and an industrial on the other. It seems like that makes sense to be a smaller commercial type unit lot.
So timing-wise, so the longest we can adopt a moratorium is 1 year, I believe. And that seems pretty simple, specific to transportation. It's harder for
Keep in mind, John, it's been 13 months since this first came up in the public.
Well, so where I'm going with it, we're going to start working on the 2050 comp plan in, I believe it's 2016, 2017.
2018.
And we don't have a plan also.
yeah, our planner
Ed's not.
bailed.
He bailed.
So when we discussed this at our last plan commission meeting, my initial thought, and this is before we had anything in depth, is just we've got more consultants now than we have staff, and it makes sense to just kind of put a pause on things and catch up a little bit.
I'm a little concerned if we make a reason for a moratorium staffing, because that's what we have consultants for. And land can scale, they have more bodies if we need it. I'd rather, from a legal litigation standpoint, keep the moratorium about real issues that are easily defendable, like the transportation plan.
And to me, that the transportation plan is easy because we can define that. The land use is more of a longer problem that I think.
Well, it's tricky because you can't really. I think I heard this at the council meeting. You can't really just put a moratorium on because you want to change the land use.
Correct.
Yeah.
You can't
That's
just
kind of why we just went transportation
Yep.
also.
Transportation is the safest
Easiest.
from a city litigation,
Yep.
like insuring yourself against litigation perspective. Also, I discussed this with the city attorney prior to bringing forward any recommendations, and this was the most sound reasoning to put one in place. If, we put it in place and the transportation plan amendment goes through and the moratorium comes off, and then there's a more significant work effort for another type of amendment, we could consider another interim moratorium ordinance at that time with different reasoning, but we wouldn't tie the two together right now because they're of different scales and scopes, and one's in process. The other one will follow the transportation plan amendment, but hasn't been scoped out in terms of timelines, and it's better to put it in place when you have a set time frame that you're expecting things to happen in, or a goal that you have to complete within that time frame. So the previous moratorium ordinance was done because of the transportation impact fees, and so that was the set nexus, essentially, that we have a 1-year time frame to get that taken care of, and once we do, then the moratorium comes off.
And in my eyes, yet, what would be the issue with knocking them both out in the next 12 months? Or is that not feasible?
Seems like a long time.
It seems like a long, to me. I don't understand why we can't knock it out in an afternoon, but
on
both.
Well, because I think the transportation.
Between all the public hearings and meetings.
No, at least, you know, I mean, the biggest issue is we don't have a planner to include in the deal. So do we all act as interim planners for a couple of meetings, a couple of work sessions?
Well, when we did.
I don't know.
The 2014 change, that was for, I think the bulk of that was to do this area. I mean, there was a room full of people. No, in reality, there was really only two.
And you know, that area is so poorly in our comp plan. I mean, there's like 200 acres of high-density residential lumped together. We're not putting 200 acres of apartments. And so and they used the wrong density calculations. They were using, I forget, it was 12 units, or I forget the units per acre, but most high-density residential is going to be at least 20, if not, you know, even more, depending on how you define your
12 to 20 in the comprehensive plan.
And well, you have to use the minimum to meet that, and the story I heard is we ended up with a lot more medium and high density to meet the Met Council's requirement, where if we just would have set the minimum density for multifamily at 20, it wouldn't look like that.
Correct, yeah, if you had more density, you could have less
That's
acreage.
what happened here. That was the
Right.
last hour change.
Right, and so that's the kind of stuff that we need to get figured out, because development's going to occur, and if we keep figuring out as we're going, that's where we get in trouble.
Well, and that's why my concern is if we do a transportation plan and then we take off the moratorium, we still have a boatload of changes that we need to do to land use.
And I think we need to keep our focus then on what's in current as our backstop too. And, you know, keep our focus, because we already said what's current. And so we got to keep our focus there, because that's where we can get development applications and make decisions, and make that our priority first, and then move into the other staging. And, you know, maybe it's, you know, I think that makes more sense than to try to encompass everything, is realize, again, we're just dealing with current. That really helps put it in perspective better. So really, we're dealing with south of 117th.
I think there's a few other current.
On the south side, that's the...
On the south side, yeah.
Oh.
In fact, that's the only thing. I mean, obviously, the other stuff that's current is a little more difficult to develop. The stuff up in where I live on the east side of the park, and then on the north side of the park. But that's it for current, because even the Delheimer is technically 2020.
So are you suggesting that we move the red line?
No, I would
No.
suggest we stick with what you're saying.
Okay.
Move the red line to how we discussed it, and just deal with the 6-month moratorium, get the transportation plan done, and realize if you need to do anything else, you need to keep your focus on the current,
On
because
that
that's
area,
where you could
yeah.
potentially get development applications that you're not ready for.
Right.
Makes sense.
Okay. We beat it to death, so.
Oh, I'm sure you
And I'd highly encourage the first work session about this is about land use, not even the transportation plan. Figure out what people are, you know, want when they're desiring, whatever.
And that goes back to my point, though, of extending the moratorium further to the north, Darren, is the transportation plan. You know, we're looking to get rid of the X and how to connect it to Fernbrook, but we need to look from 129th all the way down to the south. And so by extending the moratorium to that 129th line, it just keeps everything in the same picture that we need to look at, versus trying to, this is where the moratorium is, even though we're looking at transportation all the way out here, And then you got people confused on why we're looking at transportation and land use out here when the moratorium's only here. Just keep the boundaries all the same that we want things to be looked at.
Right. And so I'm with Peter. I could care less if you go to 129th. When I said the boundaries that we talked about, I was more talking the west side of the park and that industrial stuff. And I still think there's, and that's where I think it'd be good to get the recommendation from the whole planning commission is what to do with the stencil property where we got the letter, because I do understand their argument. And I don't know how real their development plans are or not. I can tell you there's a lot of multifamily going up in Maple Grove, right at our border right now.
That's about the only place left to build in Maple Grove with any sort of bulk, is right on our.
Right, it's that yellow property right there.
Coming in right
That
now.
little yellow triangle?
It's the pink.
Yeah,
it's the two pink ones.
Oh, it's the pink
right
one.
there. So we've seen a townhome development proposal on it,
Yeah,
and we also saw apartment development.
yeah.
And I think in her letter, she mentioned that there was something with apartments still going on. I don't know if you guys got the letter.
Yeah.
I did, but I'm not used to checking my city
seen it.
email address
neither.
now, so I missed it until you guys referenced it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And it seems like, we don't need to discuss this too much, but it seems like a lot of their issues are access, right?
Yes,
So,
which is exactly why you point back to the transportation plan and include that intersection as part of the transportation plan. You might not come up with anything, but at least you looked at it.
You know, so, and again, I haven't read the letter, but, I mean, the issue there is transportation, and that's kind of what we're talking about.
That's been our issue at the last couple times that they've come up here.
Yeah.
That was a big concern of both the commission, the public, of that interchange.
And so you add in the I would say you just make it the county access points, and you add in any intersections existing along Fernbrook or future, and then the territorial at 81. We've already got the Dayton Parkway at 81, so you don't need that as part of your transportation plan. And you then you're treating them all equal. You're treating that property equal as the one next to the Lee property on Fernbrook. Does that make sense?
you mean just to have like bullet points that all.
We're looking at these intersections as part of our transportation plan, and that is why there's a moratorium going on in this area is because it's affected by a transportation point.
And again, it's, if we can get this hammered out in 6 months, it won't affect that anyway.
Right. Just as a counterpoint to Peter, and only because it's in her letter, is she doesn't think that they've got access on 81 is her argument. So they don't care about the rest of it. That's our problem to figure out. Which, maybe she's right, but
They have access.
they would have access from territorial too, but their primary access is, they had a curb cut on 81 right in the middle, right in, right out.
The county will not allow
They're not
that.
going to allow that.
I think that,
With a redevelopment, the
you guys
county
weren't
will
here,
not.
were you?
So I can provide a little context. So we've received multiple, these are all things that will be in the public hearing at City Council, but we have received comments from the Stensley and the developers looking at developing that property enclave, as well as a couple other interested parties, mostly up in the industrial park near French Lake, or the industrial areas, I should say. For the Stensley property, the developer, not the developer, but the enclave submitted a really rough concept that they were planning on coming in next month with an application for a concept plan. They kind of rushed a rough sketch in just to give us an idea of what they were proposing, because they've had conversations with city staff but have not submitted anything formally for review to come before you. It does show a connection on 81 and Territorial and realignment of the intersection on Territorial and 81, which has been a goal to complete. So this would impact their plans, as they have the Enclave company has it under purchase agreement for the property, and we're moving ahead with coming forward with applications. So this would essentially halt what they're proposing to do for 6 months if it was included in the boundary.
So
And they have approval from the county for the connection?
They've had discussions with the county, is my understanding. I wasn't part of all the conversations. Zach was, so he'd have to. That's why I didn't want to speak ahead of or out of turn, because he will speak at council about it. And I've only met with them once, but they show an access, and they have had conversations that it would be allowed, as far as I know.
The last couple that have come up, it was they've They've shown the access, but the county has denied it through the engineering notes that are in the packet, is what I recall.
Okay.
It
So-
would shock me if we can't get a stoplight at 81 and Territorial, how they can get an access.
Right.
Well, and having a second, another access makes it harder to get a stoplight there.
Right.
So, but, even with the moratorium, that's not going to stop a concept plan from coming to us.
Yes, it would. Yeah, moratoriums restrict, city can't accept any development, any application at all. No concept plans, no preliminary plats, we can't accept an application. Even if it doesn't give them development rights on the property, because a concept plan is informal only with feedback, the city is unable to accept any application, aside from ones that are already entitled. So they've either got an approved preliminary or final plat, and coming in with building permits for existing lots of record.
I asked this about 1,000 times over the past couple of years, and you're saying that it precludes concept plans also?
It's any application that the city would receive. That doesn't mean the city can't have conversations with a developer informally, but the city doesn't accept an application that they would then accept fees and escrows and application materials for.
That means
But
we,
you don't
does that mean we
accept
can take a
fees on
vacation for
concept
6
anyway.
months?
Pretty much, correct, yeah. I mean, well,
I understand.
assuming there's no other ordinance work or transportation plan amendments.
Well, we don't do any of that with concept plans anyways, right?
Right.
They're totally informal,
There's no fees or nothing.
non-binding discussions. So there's no fees, there's no nothing.
As far as I'm aware, I can confirm with Jay, the city attorney, to confirm, but as far as I'm aware, development moratoriums preclude the city from accepting any applications, regardless of whether it's a concept plan or something more formal like a CUP or a site plan.
And I believe there is a fee, an escrow required
For a concept plan?
Well, it seems the focus is in that area is why, when you determine that final boundary. I'm a little torn. I could go either way, whether that's in or out. And we also saw the Dene came in for an application on, I think it's dead now, but it was at the northwest corner of French Lake Road East in Territorial, if you guys recall.
Yeah, that's dead.
But I'm just saying there's another property that it probably is not impacted by the transportation plan, that if someone came in with a development, or the specific parts of the transportation plan we're trying to address to manage risk.
I would argue that one, is that the one right there?
Yep. This
And
whole,
that one abuts French Lake Road.
So
And we're
we
trying to
can't
figure out
all
what
see
French-
the screen, if someone can point it out to the bigger screen.
Yeah, it's
keep going from the purple.
You know where the Pulte development is
It's
there?
kind of cut off on
Right
the
there.
screen.
Yeah,
right there.
That property abuts French Lake Road, and we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out what French Lake Road is going to do.
Yep.
Even though we're not going to change it right in that area, we need to know if it's going to widen. We need to know if it's.
And I'm only saying this from a counterpoint from litigation risk, but we already have a plan. And I get it, we're amending it, and the big thing that we're amending it is because the X is going away, so that's why I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, I'm just saying use caution with these properties we're talking about. Because they are also in the special assessment area for the interchange, so they're paying special assessments. So just my advice is, those are probably the parcels that we just identified you need to think the most about, is should they be in or not?
So this road here too, Rush Creek and Territorial has been discussed, that's dust.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That is
I haven't
dust.
heard
That's up
anything
in the
about
air
that
as to
for,
what we're doing with that also.
I think that's dead too. I haven't heard anything for 4 months.
Okay.
Okay, so Darren, your suggestion is to have a unified recommendation from Planning Commission.
Yeah, I don't know obviously, I think what we're talking about, it sounds like everyone's in agreement. It's not, the moratorium's not a big deal. It's necessary with the transportation plan. I think where we're in having discussion is boundaries. I think we're all okay with the north boundary being 129th, the east boundary being the park, the west boundary being the Cubes, kind of, west of the Cubes development and the new Dayton Parkway coming up. And I think more importantly, and I guess this is where you guys should all chime in, is what's your take on these last parcels we just discussed? the stencil and whether they should or shouldn't be.
I would say it's a little tough. You know,
It's not a simple answer. I
no,
agree. That's why I'm
it's,
not.
you know, trying to think of, okay, the hardship of putting something off by 6 months is essentially you put it off by a year.
You know, the hardship is hard to measure because the market could turn tomorrow. The market could turn with,
either way, yeah.
You know, the joke in the development world is a recession might spur development because interest rates will drop. So, you just, you know, I think you got to think about these individual properties here and whether they should or shouldn't be in.
And this wouldn't happen, the moratorium won't happen until the 14th, I believe, right?
Correct. It wouldn't be
That's-
formalized
that's our
until
next
city council
council,
took
yeah.
action on it.
And I completely understand every single point Peter has made that
Yeah.
why maybe they should be in it. I also think there's reasons why they shouldn't be, and
Well, the other.
my gut's telling me that they probably shouldn't be, but I get it, it's very debatable.
The solution around that, I mean, you know, this will be their solution, not ours. The solution around that would be, they would have until the 14th to bring some sort of a plan and
Well, it
and
would
pay a
have to
fee,
be a
not.
preliminary plan.
Well, we just said it.
They'd have to- yeah,
A concept plan is fine too.
Yeah, but if they brought a concept plan in, that they still couldn't bring a preliminary plat in after that because the moratorium requires that they've already got preliminary plat approval.
Do we potentially take on any other risk by exempting a couple properties from a moratorium like that? Is there any sort of risk there that anyone else that's inside of that area could act on the fact that we've given?
I mean, is there a way to identify?
A special scenario for
Yeah.
a couple of properties and excluded them?
Is there a way to just identify the properties that are impacted by the transportation plan directly? Because I don't know if their property is impacted by what we would change in the transportation plan.
Well, if we do look at different areas, you know, and again, you know, this intersection, it would be nice to make, you know, take some sort of deep look at, but I don't know that we're gonna have a better answer.
Yeah. It's also a slippery slope because now are you going around each property and
Right.
saying, no, that's 2 properties away from where the road's going to go, so we don't put that in the moratorium, right? So it's like, it's almost like you got to just take a block of area and just look at it holistically.
I would
If you're
encourage
gonna
the
do it.
discussion to be surrounded about what you think is impacted by the transportation plan amendment, since that's the reasoning we have for inputting or for looking at the development moratorium. Just so that they're tied together, that's just litigation adverse.
Still not convinced of that. I don't understand, our land use is messed up.
Right, but I'm saying the reasoning that we were directed and that we're looking at doing is the transportation plan amendment. So we can't include an area based on a land use discussion that we have yet to have.
So timing wise, I mean, for anyone that's, you know, they're on the cusp of submitting a plat, I mean, our goal is to have everything figured, what we think is figured out by June. Then it goes off to the Met Council and they'll do the review and by August.
Do we have I mean, I heard this at the council meeting, that it doesn't matter if we put it out for a year, we could always repeal it in 6 months, right?
You can, yeah.
And so why not include this whole area in 3 months, 4 months, when we get the feedback from the transportation plan and we decide, okay, we're done looking at these intersections, open it back up. Oh, you know, narrow it down to what needs to be then what's really impacted by the transportation plan. You know what I'm saying?
Or you can't have that agreement that, hey, this is gonna take 6 months, but we know what you're thinking. They're not gonna build before 6 months anyway, more likely than not. I mean, I don't know if they have plans all built and somebody ready to dig the holes or not.
Which one? You mean
Enclave.
Stencil Enclave? I mean, even if there were a concept plan, it would still take 6 to 8 months to
Well,
get through
right.
full approvals.
all the financing, but what we're doing is delaying that process. We're not, so they have to start the process 6 months from now.
Mhm.
And then, and not saying that's the end of the world, we're delaying the process, where they started it now, they can maybe be breaking ground in 6 months. Versus if we delay the process, they won't break ground for 9 to 12 months, which is here nor there. I think that I would prefer to keep it, well, let me ask this, the scope of work for the transportation plan amendment, are we even looking at anything besides the X?
No. The scope work is very defined, and it's based on that X and looking at the 3 options that were part of that SRF study. And this isn't my project, it's Kendra's, so I can't.
So if we took on more, we're asking council to approve a greater scope of work to figure this out. So I guess that's that's left with you guys when you talk at the council meeting, is if we're asking to take, whatever you guys decide with the boundary at the council meeting, if we do, if we're trying to look at specific intersections that are not part of the scope of work now, we need to add them to the scope of work if we're going to list them.
And I would argue that where I'm going with this, Darren, is depending on what that connection to Zanzibar looks like is going to depend on what that 117th French Lake Road intersection looks like, and that's going to have a trickle-down effect all the way down French Lake Road, all the way north up French Lake Road. 117th is pretty straight and pretty developable. It might have an impact, but it probably won't.
It's straight, but that's part of the challenge because all the traffic is feeding in. It could become a pretty major east-west if we don't.
And that's why when we start talking down here, that there's that diamond-shaped property, the Duff property. There's been talk of straightening out that to Territorial and Rush Creek. There's the intersection at Territorial and 81. There's just a lot of other little issues down there that are ripple effects, and it's, you know, you look at the ripple effect of 117th, and yeah, it's the width, right? If it's a collector, it's the width. Down there, it's the alignments, and that's where the issue is.
Yep.
And that's why I'm saying maybe leave it a little broader, because it might poke, the transportation plan might poke a few holes where we might need to, hey, let's look at this before we close the moratorium.
I would agree. I mean, this is going to have a big impact on certain property owners that are wanting to do something right now. But, I mean, our job is we're looking at the long-term future for decades. And so it's easier for us to say, you know, let's take a little bit of time and make the right decision so that we're not back here, you know, 2 years from now talking about another moratorium.
I think that the idea of opening up the scope is really a wise idea too, because again, if we're going to be revisiting land use and a bunch of other pieces of the comprehensive plan, especially as we move towards whatever, updating to 2050, I mean, it would just be nice to get out ahead of some of these things too, especially as we start creeping on that staging area towards that place. It'd be nice to have that plan again, not come up like Lee, where all of a sudden we're being really reactive, where we should have just kind of been able to follow the existing plan.
So far, I'm hearing kind of an agreement on at least the north-south and east borders. It's the west that's a little questionable.
South. It's the south border.
South,
Yeah, I think what we're hearing is Peter's open to more. It sounds like maybe Ryan's open to more. I'm on the fence, and so I don't know where you guys stand.
I would say more. It's more of to me, it's more of an issue on the time period. You know, if it's 6 months versus a year.
Yeah, I think that the consensus is you guys are doing a 6 month to start with, right? Because you can always add.
Yeah, you can add. We
Can you add, or do you have to just reissue a new?
No, you just do another.
We would just, I mean, if you said 6 months, you'd have to
do another.
then do another development moratorium.
You
You just come out of the interim ordinance you had and then adopt another interim ordinance for 6 months. So if it's, I would recommend if you're leaning towards going for a greater amount of time, going with the greater out of the two, just to not have that extra step in the process and have to post for a public hearing and go back through adopting the interim ordinance again.
I would have preferred just putting that at a year and getting it done, and then we shut it off. The problem is, I don't know, that there was a lot of.
You can always come out of one early.
Well, it sounds like the big thing is we just have to have clear a clear goal of what we're trying to get to, right? Because there has to be a clear definition of what we're doing for the moratorium. So that really kind of sets the 12 months or whatever, or 6 months or whatever shorter period is going to be. It's going to be us meeting that.
Right, you could say 12 months, and the goal is to complete the transportation plan amendment, and then if in 9.5 months you complete it, then you come out of the interim ordinance early. And yeah, it has to be based on reasoning, and it's defined in the statute, and that's what you essentially base the interim ordinance on for the moratorium.
Yeah, you know, where I struggle is 95% of the properties aren't going to matter. And it's the properties we've been talking about in the south that present the biggest risk to the city and potential development applications. So
Well,
I just want to make sure
Some of that's,
I say not matter, meaning that likely the development cycle is going to take care of it, meaning
sure.
we have time.
So,
I still think though that with transportation changes comes land use changes, and it kind of boggles my mind that we don't look at getting that duck lined up before we turn it back on. I don't get it. Because, you know, this is commercial, I think, right, the red?
Yeah.
yeah.
Explain to me why this is red.
Thankfully, it's
There's
2020
nothing
though,
there.
Dennis. That's why I think we got to keep in mind when we're thinking about this is
Yep, I
if we
get it.
overcomplicate it, and that's the one argument maybe not to go far north is from a litigation risk, is just keep it to the current staging plan. Because, you know, it's just simpler from a litigation risk. We don't have to worry about stuff outside the current staging plan. We need to figure it out, but we don't need to worry about it for a moratorium.
Yeah. And I don't know, I guess I'd have to look again and see what's in current versus what I think land use is going to change. But yeah, north of,
So that pink is current, correct?
Current is south of 117th.
Yep.
Okay.
So nothing north of 117th is current. Well, I think you've heard a lot of our recommendations. I mean, I don't know if we have we don't need to vote on anything. I think
No,
you've
it's
got
just-
Peter's, mine,
Yep.
everyone's gave their recommendation. And
Yeah, I think, you know, when this goes to the council of, you know, having a good conversation with Jay on, you know, trying to limit our litigation risk. I mean, we're not going to eliminate it, but, you know, he may have a totally different view than what we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll run all of this by him before the council meeting just to get his blessing or
Yeah.
get his thoughts.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment, as usual, there's some good commentary coming from you guys that'll help us bring it to the council, so thank you.
Usually I think we confuse you more. Go around in one circles. Okay. Anything else on this item? Okay, if not, we'll move to item 8, new business for election of officers.
Correct. We're looking for a chair and a vice chair. I don't believe you guys have completed that yet for this year since Paul's resignation.
This should take about 5 minutes.
And the direction
okay,
was
raise your hand if you want to be chair.
and the direction was that council will let you guys choose.
Okay. Well, I'm going to open it up for nominations start out with chair.
I'll make a nomination for myself.
I was going to nominate Peter, so he beat me to it, unfortunately.
I'll nominate John Seafold.
I'll second myself.
We need 3 calls for nominations.
Okay. Are there any nominations? Any nominations? There's my third. Okay, otherwise we'll close nominations. Peter, you?
Do I have anything to say?
Yeah.
No, you know, I'd say the last year or so we've had a lot of good input on the as a planning commission. I think there's a few times where we've had either a lot of agenda items or no agenda items. There's been times where we've gotten down the path on something that we shouldn't even be concerned about as a planning commission. But we always have a nice civil meeting, so it's been one of the things though that I've been, I think, lacking and on the council, or on the planning commission here, is what's the direction of the planning commission outside of the items that staff brings us. And so I would like to drive that a little bit more. I'd like to take a look at, in advance of, what are the city, the council's concerns, what are parks concerns, what are EDA's concerns, and how can we tie that together as a city and make things functional. John, I know you were at the last EDA meeting, and I tried to go, but I couldn't because a kid dropped off.
It's hard one this morning.
But there's a whole city, the EDA is looking at the downtown village and trying to get us involved in stuff early, and early in that type of planning is things that I want to do and help drive a little bit. John, you run a very diplomatic meeting, so I will commend you on that.
Well, thank you. So, good? Okay. From my, I think of more of my experience, and I'm going to say I am a little rough on the edges of running a meeting because I like to give everyone the opportunity to speak, and it's not always in an organized and diplomatic way. But, and I'll take ownership of that. From my experience, my daytime job is kind of doing this stuff. So I do have, many years of experience, whether it's being on the staff side of commissions or serving on this. So I'm trying to think. I've been on the planning commission, I believe, since 2015, and otherwise been, whether it's a planning commission or a park commission in Dayton or Champlin, I think since 2005, if I remember. But Peter, I'm glad you're driven. No, I think we should all be. So that's what I have. But that's what I've got.
I think we got two very good choices in front of us. I will just add that I'm happy that I've talked to both of you a little bit about it. It's good to know that maybe we can be a little bit more proactive with, making a to-do list of all the inconsistencies in the comp plan and stuff like that. And then once we have a checklist made, is bringing these things to council to see where they see the priority is and start checking them off.
In looking through some of the city material, so I know the council has a strategic plan, but it's old. Unless there's a newer one that's just not published somewhere. I'm seeing blank faces, so I don't remember what year it's
You
from.
talking about like our goal list?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
You're not
updated.
talking about the red dot, green dot thing.
I think
No, this is a written plan.
Well, it gets written every 2 years, every election.
Okay.
We go through those and,
We have not done this here in Dayton. I know there's other cities that have essentially an annual work plan, and also what I'm going to say is a memorandum of understanding between the responsibilities of staff and the responsibilities of the commission. So, I'll give the example of, the commission of, we're attending, we're reading the plans, we're asking questions beforehand. So we've not had that here at Dayton, and it's more, to be more progressive cities, but that's something to consider. Okay. So with that, I'm going to close nomination. So nomination for chair is Peter. All in favor, say aye.
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 You seconded it, you're on the.
I know. Well, Peter changed my mind. Okay, I didn't count the votes for that, but I'm going to say it sounded like a majority. So all.
I haven't had a chance to vote yet.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Are you gonna call for a vote?
Yes, call in favor for a vote for Peter. There's 4 out of 5 for John Seavald.
I vote for John Seavald.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Peter has been nominated as chair or elected as chair. For vice chair, is there any nominations?
I'll nominate John.
I'll
second
Okay,
that.
I'll accept that. Any nominations? Any nominations? Okay, nominations closed. Vice Chair for John Seaval? Aye. Good, opposed? No, I'm hoping that, yeah. Okay, so I will accept as Vice Chair.
And Peter, you'll accept?
Yep, I'll accept as chair.
All right. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting though before you take
Yeah,
over.
go ahead.
Okay, what do we have? Notices and announcements.
I do not have any this evening, other than the council is having a workshop coming up here with staff, and hopefully have a productive evening with that. And they are working towards that city administrator hiring, so that process is ongoing. I did get word last week, I believe it was, that the candidate for city planner that was approved by the council several weeks ago, he has actually resigned now. He is not coming to the city date, so, yeah. Again, I really appreciate all your input and things. It helps us do our jobs to help them do their jobs.
Sure. Well, be here for a while with your colored fingers up. Yeah.
I was going to give one other update, just because I know there was some discussion about knowing things ahead of time. So we have received one application that is tentatively scheduled for your April meeting, and it's an ADU, accessory dwelling unit. Assuming it's complete, as we haven't finished the completeness review, but if it is, it'd come to your April meeting.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Anything from the commission?
I will not be here for the April meeting. I'll probably be up in the sky, so I won't be able to even watch it.
Fine.
When is the April meeting?
April 4th at 6:30.
April 4th. Okay.
Do we need to move it?
Well, it's a regular scheduled meeting. So.
I understand.
I mean, if you guys got 4 people, you should be, or 3 people, whatever the form.
If we have one agenda item for an accessory unit,
That's,
we can probably.
I'm just, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm asking, not particular, just Darren, I'm asking all of us.
Yeah, quorum would be 3, so we'd need three present.
April 6th, right?
4th? 6th?
4th?
April 6th?
Is it, which one's the Thursday? Is it the wrong date?
It's the 6th.
Agenda? 6th then.
Okay. Okay. You know, I did attend the EDA meeting, so it was a struggle to get here for early meetings. But no, the EDA had a good conversation on the village. You know, they are going to involve the Planning Commission, Park Commission, and so on. So I don't know what their timeline is for continuing that discussion, but it's not a. I don't think it was intentional that we're excluded to begin with.
One suggestion I would give to council, since Dennis is here, is, you know, just prioritizing all of our time. Is if the historic village needs attention, but that needs attention more.
Yep.
100% agree.
Okay. Otherwise, hearing nothing else, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Whoops, if I
You
don't
gotta
step
take
on the
a motion in
microphone.
a second.
I do, oh, yeah.
I'll make a motion
Is
to
there,
adjourn.
Can we not just honorarily leave it open, just kind of,
till the 6th? It's-
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Oh,
I actually did it. You
yep,
didn't
so
hear me,
there's a
though.
motion by Paul for
Yeah.
adjournment. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.